Thank you all for your patience. And thank you for being here at our very first school board meeting for the new academic year. Thank you so much. At this time, I will reconvene into open session this meeting of the Arlington Independent School District Board of Trustees for August 3rd, 2023, beginning at 7:22. Members of the public may access this meeting via AISD website at www.aisd.net. One or more of the trustees may participate in this meeting via video conference call. A quorum of the Board of Trustees will be physically present at the Administration Building. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Our board meetings are open to the public, and we welcome everyone and thank you for participating in public education. While our meetings are open to the public, this is a meeting and we have business to conduct. Disruptions will not be permitted. Anyone who disrupts the meeting or speaks when others are speaking may be asked to leave or be escorted out by security attending the meeting. We welcome civic input, but we must insist that we remain respectful and civil. Thank you for your cooperation. We will start our meeting with the opening ceremony. Please join Mrs. Haynes in leading us in the pledges. Seated. Please silence all cell phones and electronic devices to avoid disruptions to those around you. And now, if you would please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. The first item on our agenda is open forum for agenda items. As stated on the posted agenda, members of the public who desire to address the board regarding an item in this agenda are required to register at www.aisd board meeting speaker request no later than 3:00 p.m. the day of the board meeting. Ms. Forsberg, do we have any requested registers to address the board regarding agenda items?
Yes, ma'am. We have one registered requester for agenda items and two for non-agenda items.
Thank you, Ms. Forsberg. Is Latoya Boozer here? Yes. If you'll step to the podium. Welcome, Ms. Boozer. This is a routine part of the school board's agenda for regularly scheduled meetings. This segment of the meeting provides citizens with an opportunity to share their views with the trustees on items that are on the agenda tonight. It is not intended to be a discussion or a debate, and trustees will not reply to the speakers. Derogatory comments aimed at an individual will not be tolerated. Personnel matters are not appropriate subjects for open forum. You will have 2 minutes to speak. Ms. Forsberg will notify you when your time is up, and then please end your presentation. Please start.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Madam President, Dr. Warks, and the senior board members, on behalf of the Security Department, can you explain who is TASB, what is their purpose, what other school district did they compare us to? Can we review the reports? And lastly, in closing, why didn't the Security Department get the same dollar amount raise like the bus drivers? Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
So much. We appreciate you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Next, we will consider administrative ratifications and appointments. Dr. Wirtz?
Thank you, President Fowler. I'd like to recommend that the board ratify the appointment of the individuals discussed in closed session.
Do we have a motion to approve the administrative ratifications as discussed in executive session?
Motion.
Motion by Ms. McMurrow. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
A second by Mr. Chapa. Please vote. And motion carries in the affirmative. Congratulations.
I'd like to,
What's going on? What's going on? He wasn't on there?
no, it had Dr. Wertz as a voting member and not one.
Uh,
I voted, let the record show that I voted in the affirmative.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbanks. And we'll see what's going on with, okay, we'll fix it. Okay, keep going, yeah.
All right. Sorry about that, everybody. So I'd like, as I announce the different individuals, I'd like to invite you please to stand so we can recognize you as I introduce you. And we're going to start off tonight with the new principal at Larson Elementary, Cassandra Lott Woods. Cassandra comes to us with lots of experience. She served as an English avid teacher at a high school in Dallas. She also served as an English 1 teacher in New Orleans at a charter school. She was an assistant principal in Dallas, an assistant principal in Richardson ISD, a reading specialist in Houston, and another assistant principal in Dallas. She has received her Master of Education from both the University of Texas at Arlington and Southern Methodist University, and received her bachelor's degree at Dallas Baptist University. Welcome, Cassandra. We're so happy to have you. The next individual we'd like to announce is Amber Cannon, the new principal at West Elementary. Ms. Cannon has lots of experience here in Arlington ISD. She served as a K through 6th grade music specialist at West, and then she also was the most recent assistant principal at West. She received her Bachelor's of Arts degree in music education at Sam Houston State University. She received a Master of Liberal Arts from Texas Christian University and a Master of Education in Leadership and Policy Studies from the University of Texas at Arlington. Congratulations, Amber. We're happy to have you at West as the new principal. Next, I'd like to announce the new assistant principal for Arlington College and Career High School is Charles Lee. Charles served as an 8th grade math teacher at Carter Junior High, a 9th through 12th grade math teacher at Seguin High School, and then he also had an opportunity to serve as one of our Aspire assistant principal interns at Carter. He received his Bachelor of Science degree at the University of Texas Arlington, and at SMU he earned his Master of Education. So congratulations, Mr. Lee. We have a new assistant principal for Sam Houston High School, Austin Noose, but he unfortunately is not able to be here tonight, but I'd like to share with you a little bit about him. He served as a basketball coach and math teacher in Waco ISD. He also had the opportunity to teach geometry in Dallas, and then he went across the pond to a high school in England, Poole, England, and served as a math teacher there, and he came back to the United States, and he earned his bachelor's degree from Amos College in Iowa, and at the University of Texas Arlington his Master of Education. So we're excited to have Mr. Noose here in our system. The new assistant principal for Bebency Elementary School is Jessica Garcia. Jessica came to Arlington ISD from Austin ISD, where she served as a bilingual 4th grade teacher, and then she also served as a 3rd and 4th grade bilingual teacher here at Thornton Elementary. She earned her Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Texas at Austin, and then she also went to the University of Texas at El Paso for her Master of Education. So congratulations, Ms. Garcia. The new assistant principal for Corey Academy is Omar Alonso. They're happy for you. All right. Mr. Alonso actually came to us from a couple of districts. He started in Irving ISD as a 7th grade dual language teacher teaching social studies at Travis Middle School. He had moved to Birdville ISD, where he taught social studies, and then Arlington ISD came to actually Corey Dual Language Academy as a testing facilitator, and he received his Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Texas El Paso, and then he earned most recently his Master of Education at UNT, University of North Texas. So congratulations, we're excited for your new role. The new assistant principal for the Piercy STEM Academy is Amalia Cervantes. Ms. Cervantes taught as a bilingual teacher in Dallas ISD and came to Arlington ISD as a bilingual dyslexia teacher and a bilingual teacher. She also worked in Mansfield ISD as an English language arts teacher at Shepherd Academy and also as an assistant principal. She earned her Bachelor of Arts degree from Texas Wesleyan University and her Master of Education in Curriculum Instruction at UTA. So congratulations, Ms. Cervantes. We have a new assistant principal at Sherrod Elementary, Leslie Roper. So Ms. Roper actually spent a lot of time here in Arlington ISD, so we're so happy for you. She was a 4th grade self-contained teacher at Williams, and she also served as a 3rd grade teacher there, a student support interventionist, a campus instructional coach, and then she was the Aspire AP intern at Berry Elementary. She earned her Bachelor of Science degree at UTA. She also has 3 masters from UTA, 1 in curriculum instruction, 1 in reading education, and 1 in interdisciplinary studies. So congratulations, we are excited to have you. And that concludes our appointments.
Thank you, Dr. Works. Y'all, can you just feel the excitement in this room? I love starting the school year like this. This is so exciting. I want to thank each and every one of you for stepping into this new position. And AISD is fortunate to have each and every one of you, and I hope you have an amazing school year. Thank you so much. And right outside the doors there, we have an AISD backdrop, and so you can stop there with your friends and family and take photos. Thank you so much. Next on our agenda are the action items. Dr. Wertz.
Whoops, sorry. Thank you. Action item A is for the board to consider appointments of a delegate and an alternate delegate to the Texas Associations of School Boards, or TASB, 2023 Delegate Assembly.
Thank you, Dr. Wertz. Dr. Reich.
Thank you, President Fowler. I'm prepared to make a motion for who I would hope the board would select as our delegates, our delegate and our alternate for TASB. It's extremely important that we have representation during the annual convention. We are very active in the organization, very active, and this is where a lot of policy decisions are made, so it's very important that we have good representation there. So I move that the board select David Wilbanks as delegate and Ms. Sarah McMurrah as the alternate delegate to represent the school district at the TASB 2023 Delegate Assembly held in September.
Thank you, Dr. Reich. I have a motion from Dr. Reich. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, and a second from Ms. Haynes. Any discussion? The voting board is having technical, is it working now, Frank? Okay, technical difficulties, so we will vote by roll call and a motion of hands, please.
Okay.
Dr. Reich?
Aaron Reich, I vote yes.
Brooklyn Richardson, I vote yes.
Sarah McMurrah, vote yes.
Justin Chapa, I vote yes.
Leanne Haynes, I vote yes.
David Wilbanks, I vote yes.
Melody Fowler, I vote yes. Motion carries. Now, action item A, official, no, wrong one. Action item B, consider endorsement of candidates for the Texas Association of School Boards Board of Directors. Ms. Richardson?
We know that having a seat on this board is incredibly important, and Mr. Chapa has served us very well in the past by being on this board and allowing a voice to be heard that represents all of us. So I want to move that the board endorses 2 positions for the Texas Association of School Boards, which is also known as TASB, and the Board of Directors for Region 11, Position B, Quentin Phillips from Fort Worth ISD, our neighbor, and for Region 11, Position C, Justin Chapa from Arlington ISD.
Thank you, Ms. Richardson. So we have a motion for Ms. Richardson. Do I have a second?
I second.
A second from Mr. Wilbanks. Any discussion?
I would just like to say that Justin has served, I don't know how many years, but he has been an excellent director and represented the interests of this district very well, and it is my sincere hope that he will maintain his position as director, not just representing our district, but all districts around the state. Thank you, Justin, for your service and your
Yes,
willingness
thank
to
you.
continue.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Raj. Very well stated. It's important that we keep Justin on this board, and hopefully he will get the votes that he needs from everyone out there and continue to serve and represent AISD. All right, so we'll do a vote by roll call and show of hand.
Aaron Reich, I vote yes.
Brooklyn Richardson, vote yes.
Sarah McMurray, I vote yes.
Justin Chapa, I vote yes.
Leanne Haynes, I vote yes.
David Wilbanks, I vote yes.
Melody Fowler, I vote yes. Thank you. The motion carries. Pass all this paperwork. You ready for consent agenda? We will now address the consent agenda items, which consist of routine items grouped together for approval as one item. Unless removed from the consent agenda, these items will be acted on at one time with no discussion. Trustees, are there any requests for items to be withdrawn from the consent agenda for further discussion? Seeing none, is there a motion to accept the agenda?
So moved.
Thank you. We have a motion from Mr. Wilbanks. Do I have a second? Second. A second from Ms. McMurrow. And again, we'll vote by show of hands.
Aaron Reich, I vote yes.
Brooklyn Richardson, I vote yes.
Sarah McMurray, I vote yes.
Justin Chapa, I vote yes.
Leanne Haynes, I vote yes.
David Wilbanks, I vote yes.
Melody Fowler, I vote yes. Motion carries. We will now move to discussion item 2. Dr. Wertz?
Discussion item A. Okay, perfect. All right, so as you know, we've been working on implementing the 2019 bond, and we want to thank all of the community members for all of their support. We have some really interesting and great projects that have been in play now for our students, and we're inviting Mr. Horn here this evening. He's going to give us an update on where we are with those projects and answer some questions that you might have.
Good evening, President Fowler, members of the board, and Dr. Wertz. I'm happy to present this information on the bond. We're moving along very well, and so you've seen a lot of this before, so I'll jump right in, and hopefully I'll be brief this evening, and we can move to the next. Let's see here. So, pardon me, let me try a different one. There we go. So you've seen this slide. I tell you each time you've seen this slide before, but it allows us to calibrate and know how the bond funds were distributed, or how they were anticipated to be distributed amongst the 4 different areas. This slide gives you a good overview, and I'll begin to break this down a little further on slides after this, but it shows you to date what we have budgeted, roughly $702 million, and the timing of this is just right before we sold, or we issued bonds in Phase 4 or a portion of them. And so had I done this maybe a month later, the number would be a little bit higher because we would have some additional funding, but you'll see how that's reflected as I go through some of these slides. But I'll give you a little better illustration as to how the money has been expended so far and what's available still. You can see that in the total line there. And then down at the bottom, we call below the line, you can see what our bond issuance costs are to date. That will increase, and you'll see that reflected in the next presentation I give to you in roughly October. And then you see the interest and additional proceeds that we have there, roughly $19.4 million. So I'll jump right into the facilities portion of this. That's pretty well balanced, but it'll just in the next week or so, again, we're kind of that time frame where we're shifting into the new budget year, and so we're issuing POs for jobs, rather large jobs like Carter, and so that's roughly a $90 million job, and so the expended portion will go up considerably, and our available will drop in our money that we use for facilities. But we're moving along quite nicely. The projects are really starting to jump forward, and you'll see some photos here in a bit. The fun part, right, of our facilities. For those of you that have had a chance to tour with me, you know what I'm about to show you. And I'll show you a little bit of the nitty-gritty stuff that you don't always get to see too. Anyway, so you'll see slides like this for transportation and security and technology as well to come. It's starting to ramp up a bit. We have 19 projects in planning right now. That's our Phase 4 projects. We anticipate that we'll bring you the selection of the architects for Phase 4 at the second meeting in September. That's our expectation. I'll bring you one for Phase 5 actually at the next meeting in August, and that will be for our Transportation and Security Center. We're going to accelerate that a bit for security reasons. And so, but we have 9 in design currently. We have 6 in bidding that are just about to move into the construction phase, 13 in construction and 5 in closeout. And you'll see a slide here next that illustrates in Phase 1, those projects are actually completed. So we've completed Phase 1 of the playgrounds project. We have completed the gun project, which you've all seen, I believe, at this point. The Crow project, the Food Nutrition Service Center, one of my favorites, and then the administration building that we're in today. And so that's our Phase 1. You'll notice that in bidding is the Martin and the Glassby project. They've been bid. We'll bring that to you here shortly as well. We hope to have that on August 17th. And so if you have questions about that, I'd be happy to answer those a bit later too. But Barry and Thornton, while they show in closeout, we have reached substantial completion, as we call it. So we're allowed to use those buildings for their intended purpose. That's what that means. So we'll have school there come August 16th, first day of school. And we've moved the principals and administration in, all the furniture's in, all their boxes have been moved over for teachers. And in fact, I think Mike Parkos was telling me just earlier that they've had registration at both schools for the students. So a lot of the students have already been to the school to see their new school. So we still have work to do, and there'll be work going on the outside. So Barry's a little bit more accelerated. It looks a little more finished, but that's just because it's ahead of Thornton a bit. But we'll still be working at Thornton all the way through the beginning of the first day of school, and probably even a few weeks after, just to tighten up the landscaping and to make sure the playground is finished and that sort of thing. So those projects are going well. Jones and Shackelford and Webb, we're still doing work, if you will, on that south site. And so as soon as that finishes up and we've restored the grass, then we'll close that project out in earnest. Shackelford and Jones, we're still waiting on a few items for accessibility, and we'll close those out soon as well. So just some fun, the pictures, right? The fun part. So this is, you've seen Webb by now. Many of you drive by it, but I wanted to start just with the Webb photo just because I wanted to highlight kind of where we are in the whole East Arlington project or plan that we set forth. And Webb was one of those early projects that we had to establish along with Crow to make all of that happen. And so We've been in that building now for one semester, and so we'll have our first full year this year, and I think they'll be excited to start the year there. A look inside, right? We haven't seen a picture like this so far, and I asked Ryan Pierce to make sure to give us something different and a little unusual. And one of the first things you approved when we started the bond was to approve pre-K furnishings for all of our campuses, just like you did with the playgrounds package as well. And so all of our pre-K classrooms are just like this. They're busy, right? But there's little ones that use these spaces, and so there's a lot of interesting little places to go and read and experience things. They've got sand tables and Lego walls and that sort of thing. So it's really cool space, but they all look like this. It's equity across our school district, and so they all share new equipment and new furnishings. And then, of course, the front of Berry, just one look at the front of Berry. And again, it looks very much more finished than Thornton. And then I've got another photo at the look of the library at the front. And while the front from the outside is exciting, if you've been inside, the library is just simply amazing. So I hope that if you haven't had a chance to go, you get a chance to tour with us or stop by and see the inside of the school. It's just beautiful. And then this is still the rendering of Thornton because the landscape's not quite finished, but I do have another photo here next that just gives you a look at, again, a little closer up. They're working their way out of the building, as we say in construction, and they're finishing up the landscape. They've made a lot of progress. They've been putting down sod, and the trees are all in, so it's really coming along nicely. And let's see, so I'll jump right into our phase 2. At this point, you can see most of our projects in phase 2 are in construction. Our playgrounds replacement project is wrapping up. We'll be finished with playground, the phase 2 portion in about 2 weeks. And we're working really well in the third phase at this point, and I'll highlight that a bit too. We have Atherton, Foster, and Johns in Wildman. Wildman's going to be delayed a bit, mainly because with Glassby being pushed back, we can't close down other stadiums at the same time. So we need to finish that one, and then in that way we have 2 stadiums that always are to operate out of. So we'll operate. We'll begin the project for Wildman a bit later. So, but I'll keep you up to date on that. And Atherton, Foster, and Johns are in the latter part of the bidding phase, and so we'll have those ready to go probably winter period of this year. A look at Arlington High that you probably don't get to see. So we have Ryan Pierce and then our project expediter. He also has a drone, and they fly over our sites and they take nice photos like this. But this gives you an idea of kind of where we're at with Arlington. We spent a lot of time drilling piers and getting the foundation ready, and now we're, as we say, we're raising the red iron or bringing the steel up, and so it'll really start to take shape and look different on that corner going forward. Again, you can really see from the aerial, though, how large that corner really was. It felt small with the old Shell station there, but there's a lot of land there, so it's really going to change that corner. And then our playgrounds, this is ditto in phase 2. Some of you probably drive by this one regularly if you live on that side of town. Just beautiful playgrounds. They're the same with the equipment and the canopies, right? But they're all a little different in how they're located on the sites and so forth, because we have different topography and things. So we try to use the site the best that we can and incorporate trees and things like that. One of the real highlights here, the reason why Ryan picked this one, was you can see now our benches are going in with the playgrounds, our kindness benches or friendship benches, if you want to call them that. You can see them in the foreground and in the background. And there's 4 around each playground set. So, and then this is what I talked about earlier, when the nitty gritty, the dirty part, right? So this is a recent photo of the Duff, used to be the Duff Gym. So we tore down the old metal structure. We're going to be building a new storm shelter gymnasium combination there at Duff, and as Mr. Parkos tells me, I said, well, Mike, what are we doing for a gym? He said, well, we took a portion of their cafeteria. We worked with the principal, and we cordoned it off with a wall, and they'll use just a small portion of their cafeteria this year as their gymnasium or recreation space on days when they can't get outside. So, but that project's moving along very well. And then, again, just some other looks of, projects that maybe aren't getting the nice big additions, right, and things like that. And South Davis is one of those schools that in a future bond would be slated for replacement. And so, but it still needs some freshening up, right? The kids deserve to have a new playground, and they still deserve to have nice carpet and stuff like that. So in South Davis, for example, they're receiving new ceilings, new lighting, some new carpeting, new paint. So a lot of the finish upgrades, things that aren't terribly expensive, that will stand some time for us until we can get a new school in place, but it'll feel fresh and new and feel nice for them. So. And then this is a bit dated, the photo, but again, it just shows you kind of the work that takes place. Again, many of you probably drove by Bailey and saw us tearing out the driveways and the sidewalks. This is along Bowen, and so all of that's been completed now. You might have a question about, well, how much parking do they have? Is this gonna work, right? They have actually 23 more spaces right now than they had when we started. So it's about the same with just a few extras. And it'll still be a bit painful. I mean, that's just part of construction, right? But when we finish, they're gonna have that east lot, if you will be complete. That'll be next summer, and they'll gain tremendously more spaces than they had before. Plus, it won't be as cramped and tight. If you've navigated through that parking lot before we started to tear it up, you know what I'm talking about. It had very narrow drive aisles and very slanted, narrow parking spaces and so forth. So this will be a challenge, just like Arlington High, but Principal Davis is great to work with, and he's been awesome to help us, schedule how we can move students around and spaces in the building. So another one, we've done this before at Arlington High. Before we began this particular bond program in 2014, we took a rather tired old auditorium, right? And we reconditioned the ceiling, put new lights in, new sound, that sort of thing. And so we're going to do much the same here at Sam Houston. It's a very unique auditorium, kind of in the round. And but it needed some help, and it was very dark and drab. And so I think when we finish, I think you'll be very impressed, just like you were with Arlington High when we did that one. Phase 3 projects, most of these are still in design, but they're nearing the end of design. And so, like Wildman, Cravens Field will be pushed back a bit, just for the purposes of making sure we have 2 fields open at any given time. But the Lamar High School project, Key, Amos, Goodman, those projects will begin to move into the bidding stage rather quickly. And hopefully by late spring, we'll actually begin to do some work, and we'll be in full construction when the summertime comes. We do have our playground Phase 3 replacement project there. I'll go ahead and kind of give you a quick update on that, and if you have other questions, I'd be happy to entertain those in a bit. Our Phase 2 work, as I mentioned, is near wrapping up now. We have about 2 more weeks with that. We only have 4 more of our foundations on our Phase 3 work until all the foundation work is complete, and then we're ahead of schedule on that. That was originally slated to be scheduled to be finished by December of '23, and again, we'll have that done probably within the next month. And then behind that comes our playground equipment, our canopies, and our surface is the last thing we put down. We've talked with the company that does that, and we feel like if we can hold off a little bit of the cold weather, after our extreme heat, we may even finish by December on that. But we were slated originally to finish in the spring of 2024 on the actual playground equipment and canopies. So we'll keep you up to date on that and have more photos and more information coming out of communications on that as well. And then finally, Short is one of those that's, again, kind of like Arlington High and Bailey at the elementary school level. This was taken not that long ago, actually, that when you're in the summer and you're doing this finish work, it goes rather quickly. Ceilings are out here, the walls and the corridor tile is gone, and carpet in the classrooms is gone. But they're making quick progress. Mr. Parkos tells me that they'll have most of the carpet completed by the end of the weekend. And while we may actually open school with no tile in the corridor floors, that's not terribly unusual. We have such a short window in the summer to do work. It'll carry over into the school year. But the ceilings are complete now and the lighting, and so we'll, if you get a chance to go through, you'll see we've made a tremendous amount of progress. And it'll be ready for school and the kids. And then, I don't know if this is my last photo, I think it is, but right now, that's Knox, or if you've been around a long time in Arlington, that was, before it was Knox, it was Ferguson, right? Right, David Lewis? David Lewis went to Ferguson there. He always reminds me. So, we do have fencing up around it, and that building is being abated now. They're in the final couple of weeks of that abatement process, just like ROARC. By mid-September, you'll actually see those buildings coming down just like you did recently with the Webb building. So, and it won't take long. They'll be, about the time they're starting to demolish that building, you'll probably see large bulldozers on the park site moving dirt and starting to prepare for the foundation of the new junior high. That's a 2-year project, though. We just have to be patient, but it'll go by quickly, and that'll be a great new school. Our Phase 4 projects, I mentioned just a little earlier that we'll be bringing you the architect selection for these projects. In some cases, some of these Phase 4 and Phase 5 projects have already been accelerated into the earlier phases because they were maybe smaller projects. The playground's a good example of that. Some of the elementaries only had playground work, our newer ones, you know, a Patrick or Adams or a Peach or McNutt, and we're doing those early on. So we have very minor things that we would be doing to some of those projects, maybe a new key system, right, for security. And so for the most part, some of those projects, even in 4 and 5, are accelerated and being completed early. And then Phase 5, this is purely pending at this point. We would probably be bringing you, anticipate bringing you the architect selection in these probably early in the spring, and we'll begin that planning on those projects, and it'll fall right in behind Phase 4. And that's when our busy season gets, because we'll have anywhere from probably 100 to 150 projects going on at one time. We're really excited about this, and I think the number is going to go up. Mr. Parkos has got some projects going that we have some really huge hub numbers, but this is exceptional, I think. We're again, our target is 20%, right? But personally, Mr. Parkos and I think many of you have shared your concerns about we want to increase that. We're at 26.64% right now in our hub percentage, which is up significantly from the bond in 2014 and even early on. And so we'll continue to push that as much as we can. And like I said, Mr. Parkos informed me that he thinks he has some projects that'll help to increase that substantially. So we'll keep that focus like we have so for the last few years. Then our fine arts budgets. What I'll point out here, or these next 3 budgets for fine arts and transportation and security, is that most of their money has been expended at this point. So they're awaiting the new money. And Ms. Moss and Ms. Martin brought information about the bond issuance recently that we put together. And so that money will be available to us here shortly. And so that'll roll over and be available for them. And they're planning their purchases now. They'll start to institute their purchase orders for their new equipment, whether it's, in this case, instruments or uniforms. And so that pie chart will shift again. And the thing about theirs, and I've explained it to you before, is their timeline is a lot shorter than mine. My projects, will span 1, 2, 3, or even 4 years. And most of the time, given, normal supply chain deliveries, their stuff can happen within a 1 year period of time. So if you look at this, if you're new to my presentation and you see on the facility slide, you see phases 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And on the others, you see years 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. That's the reason why. I can't measure mine necessarily in a year because I can't spend, $200 million in a year's period of time. So that's why you see the difference there. But this will begin to shift, and Dr. Anderson will have a significant influx of money to be able to move his year 4 purchases. The same thing for technology, safety, security, and technology. There's still a pretty significant amount of money, but excuse me, I was going to say the wrong thing. They tend to spend like I do. It's in larger chunks because they're going to buy a lot of computers and technology equipment at one period of time. A lot of the money that they've had so far has been used on the district-wide infrastructural change for the fiber network. And so that's beginning to wrap up, and the last portions of their money will be spent primarily on equipment at that point for students. And then transportation, again, most of this is buses. I explained this to someone the other day, and I'll share this with you. Even though, again, there's a larger pot of money in facilities than there are in the other 3 areas, I still build facilities for these groups all the time. So we're building, fine arts facilities at high schools and junior highs, and athletic facilities and things like that. So it's my responsibility to do that, but it serves these other groups just the same and those students. So with that, I'll stop, and if you've got any questions, I'll be happy to answer your questions this evening.
Do we have any trustees with questions? Ms. McMurrow?
Thank you, Mr. Horn. This is really exciting, and I especially love seeing the photos that Ryan took inside the facilities that we haven't seen since they first opened. So that's awesome that they're being lived in now. I had a couple questions. So staff is reporting back, and some of us never left. We're working around the year. But now that teachers are reporting back, I'm thinking about our updated and our new facilities. Are teachers and staff going to be able to work in their rooms on days in which they're supposed to be working in their rooms?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
So the only change there might be on Short. I showed that photo of Short and where they were. There, we've arranged with the principal there for them to, the first 2 days that they're back on duty, they'll be in a different location other than the school, but that's primarily to give the contractor just a little more time to make it more livable. If I can get an extra day or two to make sure they've got carpet in their classroom, that just makes it, they don't have to move furniture out or move things around. So
Sure.
the principal's been very good about working with us on that. But that's the one
great.
school where we have that.
That is great to
issue.
hear. And then my only other question was about phase three playgrounds. So it sounds like, and I might have misheard, so it sounds like you mentioned that they were actually ahead, but I know that there
Right.
are several campuses where the concrete is poured.
Right.
But is there a lag in the actual structure going in?
No, we, like I said, phase 3, we only have 4 schools left that the foundations have to be poured. And we've actually slowed them down just a little because we'd rather not have the foundation just sitting there and the optic of people saying, well, why is it taking so long, for this to finish? The equipment we have, as I've told you before, we have all the equipment, and the supplier is going to go ahead and begin to install that even without the surface. But the surfacing is the trick. There's, we have a lot of surfaces to put down, the rubber surface, that is.
Yes.
And so it's a bit of a balancing act. There are very few people who do that throughout the country.
Okay.
And so we have a crew here that's working project by project. So as they finish one, they move to the next and so forth. But the weather plays a part in that too. So, and why we think we might finish a little ahead of schedule is up north, as it gets cold, meaning the North United States, as it gets cold below 45 degrees, which will actually start to happen for them very soon, right? Those crews can no longer work on playground surfacing there, so they shift and they start coming south, and they'll come and we'll end up with an extra crew or two. And so we're still a little bit, as somebody might say, maybe a little slow right now because it's just one at a time. But as we get into late September and October, when those crews start to move down, we'll pick up extra resources and it'll accelerate our projects. And that's why we think we might finish earlier than the spring when we initially anticipated.
Okay. And then I'm curious, is the rubber surfacing service or materials, is that something that COVID impacted? Is that why we're not going with a local company?
Well, we actually use a local company,
Okay.
but there's very few of these companies around, and they're kind of migratory. They'll go where the work is, and
Okay, I see.
and so that kind of thing. So, and we have a big project. Obviously, we're a big project, but there are a lot of school districts like us in other areas, and that window on the northern United States is so much smaller because
Right.
because if it's below 45, they can't do any work.
Right.
So in the summertime, these companies will shift and go north, if that makes sense. So whereas with us, it stays warmer longer, and so they'll come in and we get a lot more done with our longer, warmer seasons.
Got it.
But it is a local company though, however, and we did experience some delays with, we hedged our bet a little bit, right? We bought all the playground equipment earlier. You talked about that before. But the rubber surfacing we did experience some delays there. But that affected phase 2 more than it's affected phase 3 at this
Okay.
point. And the same thing with concrete and steel, or the rebar that's used in the concrete. We did experience some delays in phase 2, And phase two was actually originally scheduled, I anticipated phase two finishing the latter part of May of this year. And we're still working on that. So we're about 3 months behind on that because of those delays in concrete and rubber
Okay.
supply.
Okay, thank you. The rationale behind that, though, makes sense, so I appreciate you answering
Yes,
my
ma'am.
questions. Thank you. And I don't think we'll have to worry about it being 45 degrees here.
No, I don't
in
think
the
so.
near future, at least. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll be having turkey at
Unfortunately.
85 degree days, right? So,
Whoops. Ooh, come back, Mr. Chapa.
I'm on.
Come on,
Thank
where
you,
are
President Fowler.
Thank you.
Mr. Horn, can you give a little bit more detail on the rebidding process and where things are with Glassby Field?
absolutely, yeah. So initially, we put that project out to bid quite some time ago, and it came in significantly over what our budget was. And so we felt like that we needed to have some refining done. So we came to you all to talk about realignment of the budgets and so forth. That was, though, one of those projects that the board decided, we really want these stadiums to go forward, a lot like our projects like Carter and Arlington High, the Fine Arts and Dual Language Academy and so forth. And so we wanted to keep that as close to the original budget as we could, right? And that first initial bid came in at $13 million over budget. So we just didn't feel like that was acceptable, and there were some things that we could do to refine the scope a bit, or as we sometimes say, value engineer. We can find other products that cost less money that are of equal value. It'd be like buying a Toyota versus buying a Lexus, right? You still get a good product, but you're maybe not buying that brand name, that Lexus brand. And so we pulled that back. We did some refinement of that scope. We did not do LED lighting, necessarily all over the concourses and stuff, because we did LED lighting, pardon me, but it's just white, not necessarily red, blue, and green to make all the colors. But that saves us $1.2 million to take that out. And there are other things we did to kind of shrink and kind of squeeze some of our square footage. We took out concrete here and there where we could. Instead of having a nice, soft, rounded corner, maybe we just cut it off at a right angle. Every little bit of concrete cut out like that saves a tremendous amount of money. So we had the architect go back and refine that scope and look at ways to try to keep that project closer to the original budget. And while we didn't get all the way back to that, we did, with the recent bids, we're about $8 million over now. So but that was also anticipated within the realignment. So we have ways that we've devised already with your input on how we can absorb that overage or that cost increase and bring this project to realization.
And
Does that
what's the new estimated substantial completion date on that?
Let's see, that would be August of, I'm sorry, I'm going in my head. August of 2025 would be when we would open the stadium back up and
Okay.
play again. So,
Thank you.
yes,
Those
sir.
are all the questions I have.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Wilbanks?
Thank you, President Fowler, and thank you, Mr. Horn,
Yes, sir.
for this update. Going back, I have a quick question on Phase 1. All the projects that you had listed there were quite familiar with, but refresh my memory, what were we doing at Shackelford Junior High? What was the scope of that project?
Yeah, Shackelford was more infrastructural. It was,
Yeah.
some mechanical work. We did some freezer cooler work in the kitchen, I believe. And then we had things like accessible ramps because of the topography around that site. We had a lot of entrances that were not accessible for wheelchairs.
Right.
And then on the interior, that was an open concept school when it was originally built. And so the walls were very thin and they weren't.
Noisy.
It was very noisy and they weren't really great. They weren't secure, so to speak, and they just needed to be replaced and updated. So we did a lot of interior finishes as well, changed the lighting out, and again, the hallway ceilings, floors, the walls, made them more durable. And, and so it was just finishes. A lot of it was just finish work.
Okay. All right, yeah, I didn't think there was anything substantial. We did notice the accessibility now is greatly improved, and the lighting is much appreciated.
Yes,
That was
sir.
always a dark and dingy junior high, kind of depressing for the students. Not so much anymore.
Right.
And I don't know if Eric is here, Mr. Upchurch is here.
Let's see, no, sir.
No, so and maybe you can answer if you can't, don't worry about it. But a big chunk you mentioned was on the fiber upgrade across the district. My question was, how much of that fiber's, maybe installed but still dark, and how much is active and actually serving our campuses?
Yeah, he and I've actually had a good discussion about that, and they are finished with that work at this point. There's still a few little spots where they're having to run into demarc points, like at the service center and places like that. But they're already bringing that up and bringing it online at this point. When I talked to him about a week ago, they were doing kind of their dry run, their test. They're still using our old network because it's there and it's reliable, but they're starting to bring that online now and test it and give it some dry runs so that they can make sure that the integrity's there. But that's my understanding of it. He obviously could give you a lot more detail on the nuts and bolts of it, but that's.
Well, and I don't want to put you on a spot, but kind of for those listening at home, kind of what the big payoff is going to be for our students and our staff outside of just bandwidth. Just are you prepared to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I basically, but the reliability of that is absolutely that's the payoff, because, with two routes into a campus, it's the same kind of thing we do with fire loops around buildings, right? And with access, ingress and egress, you want multiple pathways into a structure, multiple pathways out of a structure. And so with this new fiber network, they have two ways in, two ways out, so to speak. So if what happens a lot, right? A subcontractor in the city is working out at the street level and they cut through a fiber and we lose continuity, right? We can't do testing or we can't communicate electronically. But with the new system, we have a second path in. And
no single point of failure.
Exactly. So they would have to be cutting multiple places in kind of a perfect
So net
storm, right?
resiliency is key, given
That's
how
right.
much learning occurs online, and not just that, just the whole operations with IP telephony and at the campuses, et cetera, et cetera. So that's good news to hear that it's finally nearing completion, but I hope that's going to also spur innovation in terms of services that we're going to be able to provide to for all operations, but more specifically down into the classrooms in terms of services for teachers and students. So my final question is, I kind of want to circle back to when Mr. Finicum was here, one of the last board meetings in June. And one of the things we discussed, and one of the questions I had for him, was the fact that there's not really a lot of depth to the information that's available on our bond oversight committee portal on the website versus days of old where we used to have Gantt charts. We used to have details where you could see how much under budget or how much over budget we were on specific projects. I'm all for transparency. We can provide that information. I know it's the wish of the committee. They have access to those Gantt charts and detailed financials on overall project status. Is that something you could provide to the board on these next phase, current phases that we're working on? Not in print. I don't want to,
Right.
I know back when I was on that committee, there was a
Huge
lot of paper
banners.
wasted, big tabloid paper, because those Gantt charts are pretty
They are, yes.
pretty big and long.
Yeah.
But if we could have electronic access and maybe a Google Docs folder where that could be stored for easy access
Yes, sir.
for my fellow colleagues and me, that would be great.
We can do that. We'll work on that for you. Absolutely.
So if I could make that formal request to our secretary for follow-up, that would be great.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbanks. Dr. Reich?
Thank you, President Fowler. Mr. Horn, I just want to start by saying thank you for all of the work, you and your team, to, as you mentioned somewhat casually, 100 to 150 projects going on at any one time. I remember many moons ago when we first started using that type of number, and most districts were challenged with 4 to 9 or 10 projects. And I think that's still the case, and here we are. So thank you. It's just superior work, what you guys do, and with the phasing and just project management is incredible. So thank you, as always. Regarding the playgrounds, I was curious, So for the companies that, I don't know if it's lay or shoot the foundation, the rubber foundation, when they get to a project start, is that like a one day? Is that multiple weeks? Can you
No,
help me with
it's,
that?
usually depends, for a little bit on weather. I mean, as long as we have good weather, if it's hot, and it works well for us, and they will come out and begin putting that surface down. It probably takes them 3 to 4 days to get that laid down, and they have, it's kind of like concrete, right? They have people who will come in and lay the material down, then they have finishers, and but it's quite laborious. They literally work. I was describing it today to somebody, it's almost row by row. They just start at one side of it, and they just work their way across, and they just keep going back and forth, zigzagging back and forth across it until they finish. So it's a lot of hard work, and they're on their hands and knees with trowels, and so, but about between 3 and 5 days.
Okay.
And of course, our playgrounds are quite large,
Right.
so it's a push for them to make sure and they get it done in that
Right, right.
timeframe.
Yeah, I was curious because I know I drive by Swift quite a
Mhm.
lot, and I've been looking at it going, I wonder
Yeah.
when that's going to happen. So what is happening for schools like Swift as far as for the students that don't have access to a playground when they come back to school?
Yeah, we've experienced that just even since phase one. We try to work with the principals to make sure that they understand that first off, we're going to be without a playground for a while, or play equipment. Again, most of them understand, and they know that the payoff is so much greater, and so they're willing to suffer through that with us. It's always great if we could do it during the summer or during a break, but it just takes more time than that. So they try to be creative. They'll do, with this heat, a lot of them tell us, don't worry about it right now because we're going to be in the gymnasium and the air conditioned. We're not going to be outside so much. And so that's another reason why we pushed really hard to try to do the work during this time and be done so that when the colder weather comes, they'll have an all-weather play surface, right? And so, but yeah, there's some pain involved, obviously, not having that play equipment. But when they start to see it come together, they get excited, and they're looking forward to anticipating the day when it opens, right?
Yeah, yeah. So are you guys going to draw straws like with Marcelo, who's going to be the hero and the villain on day one?
I think I'm going to let Dr. Wirtz swing next time.
So I appreciate that. My only other question was on the buses, on transportation expenditures. As far as school buses, are we going with any propane, or is it all diesel? And can you kind of tell us, is propane still considered a great success for the district?
I probably should probably defer that one to Dr. Hill if he's still in the room, because he probably has a better idea of just what. But I think it's a combination, but I'll let him give you the details.
Okay, thank you.
Greetings, good evening. Dr. Rice, yes, we are going with a combination of propane and diesel. The diesel really for the long haul, and the propane more for the shorter trips. And it's being efficient for us. It's working. The drivers like it. They're quieter. And we're also, just so you know, we got a grant opportunity that's possibly that we're going to start piloting some EV buses. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And they will definitely be short haul here within the city, so, yeah.
Yeah. I can't even imagine how far an entire bus would go.
Yeah, so.
That'll be interesting. Well, let's just hope that's not a failed experiment. I don't want to see students stranded on the roadside going, we're waiting for this thing to charge.
Yeah, exactly, so, but no.
Very good. Thank you very much. That's all I have.
Anyone else with a question or comment? Mr. Horn, thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you for all you do. You're the busiest person I know, and 150 projects. I cannot even imagine how you keep up with all that, but you do, and you do it so well. We appreciate you and your team. Thank you so much.
If I could, I appreciate that, but I always say Mike Parkos, who's in the back of the room, he and the team that manage all the projects with me, they're phenomenal. And so he's the smartest guy I know, and smartest guy in construction as well. So, but thank you, Mike, and I appreciate you all very much, and thanks for your support.
Thank you, Mr. Horn.
You bet.
We are now ready for discussion B, the accountability update. Dr. Wertz?
Thank you, President Fowler. As you know, we've gone through an accountability refresh is what it's called, where the state has refreshed the way that our grading is done in terms of the calculation. That's what it's called, a refresh. So tonight, I thought it would be good for us to share with the board not only what those changes are, but what the potential implications are. The state's recently released opportunities for us to do what they call a what-if scenario, where you look at last year's results and you apply them in this scenario. So we want to share with you some of those outcomes, and then also provide you with an update on how the district is responding to support schools as we move into the new school year. So tonight we have Dr. Buell and Dr. Lopez, and they're going to share this information with you.
All right, President Fowler, members of the board, and Dr. Wertz, thank you for your time. So I'll go through overview of accountability. I know that's always just such an interesting, in-depth topic, but we do have two new board members, and so I won't go into too much detail, but we'll do a comprehensive overview. Move into the what if, and then Dr. Buell will talk about our plan for this school year. So as far as the accountability calculation for the 2023 refresh, this methodology will remain unchanged from the prior year system. So the domains, there are 3 domains. Student achievement is 1, school progress is the 2nd, and then closing the gaps is 3. So the better of 1 or 2, student achievement or progress, that way is weighted 70% in the final calculation for campuses. And then closing the gaps is domain 3, and that accounts for 30%. So same last year's calculation as this year. So now I'm going to go individually into the domains, just give you some information on those. So domain 1 is student achievement, and this is meant to measure the campus performance based on how the students are achieving academically and on the STAR test, in college, career, military readiness indicators, and then also in the graduation rates. So for the weights for domain 1, there are no changes from the prior year system to the current year system. For elementary schools, and junior highs, it's 100% STAR. So domain 1 is basically how did they do on their STAR test in the spring. And that's an average of the approaches, meets, and master's performance levels. But for high schools, it's those 3 areas. So STAR is 40%. CCMR is 40%, and then graduation rates, or if a dropout rate is used if graduation rates are not available, that is the remaining 20%. So that's the breakdown for the categories. I've included an accelerated tester slide because there was a proposal in a few months ago, whenever the proposal before this proposal was. And so they mentioned wanting to include accelerated testers in a different way. So for the high schools. So the definition of what are accelerated testers. So students who complete a STAR or EOC at the approaches grade level or better in Algebra 1, English 2, or Biology, and they do that prior to going into 9th grade. So those kids will never have a score that goes into accountability at the high school that they attend. And so TEA wanted a way to include a measure for them in some way. And so what they do is they take either an SAT or an ACT score and give their score an equivalent performance level correlated to the STAR performance levels. And they include that into the A to F rating for the high school once those accelerated testers get to their senior year. They wanted to change that up because it felt like a really long time between when you take Algebra 1 in 8th grade to when you finally end up being a senior. They ended up not doing anything with it. They did not adopt the proposal, so it's going to be exactly how it was last year for the high schools. And then here are the cut points for STAR. When you take your average of your approaches, meets, and masters for the STAR portion of domain 1, that's the raw score. It then gets scaled. Okay, so for an elementary, if your average is a 60, that would scale to a 90. And then obviously anything higher than a 60 would scale up from a 90 up to 100. And so that's just kind of how that scaling works. So that given you the elementary, junior high, and high school breakdown for A through D. Now for high schools, they also have that graduation component. They're still going to use the best of the 4, 5, or 6 year. And then if no graduation rates available, they use a annual dropout rate. But they have made this scaling slightly more aggressive than it was in the prior year. So included the table there on the right-hand side for you to see. So even 90% graduation rate earns you, a 98.9% graduation rate earns you only a 90. And so a 90.9, I'm kind of going down the 10th row here on the table, a 90.9 graduation rate earns you a 60. And so the scaling has gotten a little bit more aggressive for the graduation aspect. So then for CCMR, one of the big changes was the phase-in of the program of study for your industry-based certifications. They've been talking about this, and it made it into the still what is considered proposed manual. But so basically, instead of just earning an IBC and getting a point for CCMR, which is how it's been in the past, you now have to earn an IBC and then also have a certain amount of classes in the program of study related to that industry-based certification. They're phasing this in. So the class of 2023, I mean, they're already gone. But they will count towards our 2024 accountability. They had a sunset limit to the IBCs that they could earn. So any IBCs that they were doing away with, they put a cap onto districts and campuses. And so we were not widely affected by that. Most of our students earned an IBC in something that was not being sunset. You'll see that the phase-in, though, for the class of 2024, they have to have one course in an aligned program of study. Class of 2025 has to then be a concentrator, which means they have 2 courses. And then the class of 2026 has to be a full-on completer in the area of study and then also pass their IBC. And then in addition to some of the changes made to just the one IBC category, because there's many other categories for CCMR. I didn't list them all out here, but in this presentation. But there are drastic changes to the scaling for CCMR specifically. So to scale to an A, last year, you just needed 60% of CCMR, of your graduates to have a CCMR point. Now it's gone up 28 points, so you now have to have 88% of your graduates earn a CCMR point in order to scale to an A. And additionally, the B, C, and D rating also had about approximately 30 point jump from just last year. So they didn't phase in the scaling on CCMR by any means. Going to move into Domain 2. So Domain 2 is school progress, and this is meant to measure kind of 3 different areas, but basically how many of your students are progressing as they should or are on track from last year to this year. What percentage of your students that did not pass are now passing? And then what are the students' achievement scores like relative to campuses that have a similar socioeconomic makeup? So Domain 2 has 2 parts. So there's an A, which is the progress part, the growth piece, and then there's B, which is the relative performance piece, where you compare campuses based on socioeconomic. So Domain 2A, this is the academic growth, and this was very big. We had a lot of campuses take Domain 2A as that 70% in 2022 because we had so much growth of our students last year. And so what this does is it looks at the prior year score for students in reading and math, because those are the tests that you take every single year. And so it looks at the prior year score, the current year score, and then determines is that sufficient growth or even growth of more than 1 year, and then awards points to students based on that. So you can either earn 0 points, a half point, just a few areas on the matrix where you can earn a half point on the table, and then a full point. So just going to look at the first line there, the first row. If I was a low did not meets grade level student last year, and I stay a low did not meets grade level student this year on my tests, so my 22 tests, my 23 tests were both low did not meets, I didn't grow because I didn't transition over to the next cell, and so I would get 0 points. But if I was low did not meets last year and then I'm high did not meets this year, well then I earn a full point. If I was low did not meets last year and then I move all the way over to meeting grade level, a full point. So it's kind of yes or no with that exception there of that little orange area where you can get a half point. Okay, and this is on our reading and our math tests. And then this is a similar matrix, but for star alternate, so there's just less performance levels on the star alternate exam, but they still do earn growth points. And then finally, there's this bonus of students that did not meet grade level on their test last year that end up passing this year. We get a 1/4 point bonus for those students. So we'll earn their growth point from this matrix, from this transition table, plus students that are in that category that didn't pass last year but passed this year get an additional 1/4 point. And it goes only into the numerator, not the denominator. So that's helpful. The cut points for domain 2A are listed here. And so that's shown by level, elementary, junior high, and high school. Now, the second part of domain 2 is B, and that's relative performance. So it looks at the achievement of students on a campus and then compares that to a subset of campuses that have a similar socioeconomically disadvantaged percentage. So you wouldn't be comparing a campus that has maybe 50% of their students that are socioeconomically disadvantaged to a campus that has 95% socioeconomically disadvantaged. And so that I'm not going to show you the cut points for that because literally every percentage band has cut points, and so that table would not even fit on the slides. But they are there. They are in the manual as well as in the SSIS package that we run to determine our internal projections. And then so I'll move into domain 3. This is the last domain, and it's closing the gaps. And so the purpose of domain 3 is to disaggregate performance of students into clusters based on racial, socioeconomic factors, other variables, like are they receiving SPED services or are they emergent bilingual in foster care, homeless. And so each group has targets in this domain 3 in different areas. And so the makeup of domain 3, the components and the calculation align to the Every Student Succeeds Act. So this is like alignment with federal requirements. So for domain 3, there's 4 components. This one's kind of crazy, so just bear with me on this. It's a lot. So there are 4 components. So academic achievement, which it seems redundant because domain 1 is student achievement, but actually academic achievement is only the meets grade level or master's grade level. So it doesn't include approaches. Then there's growth or graduation. So growth is taken for elementary and junior highs, and then graduation is taken for high schools because obviously there's no graduation rates for elementaries or junior highs. School quality or student success, so that's going to be CCMR for your high schools, or basically a domain 1 equivalent of the average of approaches, meets, and masters for the elementary and junior highs. And then finally, English language proficiency, which is measured by TELPAS. So there's 4 components within domain 3. And then the targets were specifically created by level this year, which is a nice change. So instead of just taking all of the historical data for students K through 12 and setting, determining what the average is and then setting the target based on that and then some, it's been disaggregated by level so that it's more specifically aligned to what students in that area did in years past. So I'm just going to show you the old target chart. So you can see there's 4 colors there. So we have yellow, green, orange, and blue. So those are the 4 areas. Okay. And then in prior years, we had a lot of student groups. We had 14 different student groups, and they were all evaluated. And so, but this is all K through 12. So I'm going to zoom in to the top left corner of this old chart. Okay. This is not this year's, but I wanted to use it to just allow you to do a comparison. So I'm going to zoom in what mathematics teachers would be considering quadrant 2 if I was to draw a coordinate plane on this. So I'm taking that top left section, okay? And so what you can see here is the all student group has a target of 44% for ELA and reading, okay? And so that's that target there. So that was established by taking, like I said, in this case, all 3 through 12 tests, ELA and reading, and looking at historical trends. So, but what they've done this year is they've customized the targets to where they're tailored to elementary and what the elementary students have done in the past junior high, and then high school. I'm not going to show you all three of the levels charts, but recall that 44% for me. Now, this is now what the elementary school sheet looks like. I'm a little sad that it's not as colorful, but the four components are still there. I'm going to zoom in on that same top left corner there. And so what you can see is now that target for the all-student group for ELA and reading is now 46%. And it's not that it went up, it's that it was disaggregated, okay? And so the elementary group, had we done this way in the past, would have been 46%. And they actually did carry on these baseline rates from what they were in 16-17. You see that gray, the gray row there, to show you that they have not increased these. They're continuing to be what they are. Now, the next interim target is right below the 46. That's 55. That is much more. And then the next interim target after that is 64%. And then the interim target after that, long-term target after that is 73%. So there's more targets to get based on what point in time we're looking at. But the reason for that is because they now have introduced grade-aided outcomes to Domain 3. So a student group isn't just yes or no, they hit the 44%. So they get a 0 or a 1. They now can earn more than 1 point, okay? So it's graded. So they're giving that for performance and growth towards those targets. So if my all-student group meets the long-term target, which is 73, then I get a full 4 points, and that's the maximum that that any student group can earn. If I don't meet that 37, 38 target, but I meet the next interim target, which is the 23 through the 27 school years, then I get 3 points. If I don't meet that target, but I show expected growth towards that target, which is a calculation, I didn't show it. I didn't want to make this complicated. So you'll get 2 points. If you don't meet the interim target, but you show minimal growth is defined as 1%, unless you're talking about graduation. Graduation is 0.1%, then you earn 1 point. If you don't meet the interim target and then you don't show minimal growth, which means basically I was 50% last year and this year I went backwards and now I'm 48%, so I didn't grow at all, well then you don't get any points. So that's a big change, is the grade-aided outcome. However, there's less student groups that are being evaluated for accountability. So instead of doing this for all 14 groups, they're only doing it for 4. So the all-student group, your 2 lowest performing racial or ethnic groups from the prior year, and then what they're calling a super group, it's a high focus. So it's comprised of economically disadvantaged, emergent bilingual, special education, highly mobile students, which could be migrant, foster care, or homeless. And so for a student group to be eligible, they have to have at least 10 students in the group. And that's a change. It used to be 25. Now, the methodology for Domain 3, I'm just going to show you a visual here. I don't want to get too down into the weeds on this, although I feel like we might already be there. But so what you can see is, like, if we kind of just look at the yellow portion on this chart, that's the academic achievement piece, okay? And so you see you have the all student, and there's 2 options there, one for reading, one for math. Then you have the 2 racial categories in the middle there. And so 2 racial groups for math and 2 racial groups for reading. And then the high focus group in reading and math. So there's a possibility of 8 targets for just the first component of Domain 3. Well, you sum up all the outcomes for those groups, the 0 through 4, and then you divide that by the number of groups times 4, because 4 is the max, so that would be 32 in this scenario. Then once you determine that percentage, you weight that. Now, if you're in elementary or a junior high, it's 30%, but if you're a high school, it's 50%. That gives you one portion of Domain 3, and that's that whole number at the end. That's that component score. That happens for all the different components, and there's 4. You sum those component scores, and then that gives you your Domain 3 raw score. Well, that Domain 3 raw score then has to be scaled. And so then this is the scaling for Domain 3. And I think it's probably because the grade-aided outcome, amongst other things, but these actually reduced from prior year. but I don't know if that's a good thing. I think that means that there's probably a lot of campuses out there that are not going to be getting 4s or even 3s. So, but again, 4 is what you want your student group to do by the year 2038. So that's pretty aggressive. Okay, so we survived, and we're going to move into the overall rating calculation for campuses. So this is where we talked about in the beginning, kind of coming full circle here, the 70% of the best of 1 or 2, and then 30% for domain 3. So you'll see here, and this is just an example. This isn't any of our Arlington ISD campuses. So our student achievement, which is domain 1 in this scenario, that scaled score was a 71. 2A is an 89, 2B is an 84. So it's going to take the basically the best of those first 3. In this case, that would be 89. That's the highest value. So the 89 is what's going to be weighted 70%. So you can see that 89 times the 70% gives you the 62.3. And then the closing the gaps domain, that's like the unavoidable. That's in this scenario, the scale score is an 81, that's going to be weighted 30%. And so the 81 times the 30 gives you the 24.3. So now you have your 2 parts, the 70% part and the 30% part. So we're going to sum those 2 values. So the 62.3 plus the 24.3 rounded goes to an 87, and then an 87 would be a B. So very simple for parents. That was one of the things Commissioner Morath said. He really wanted this to be transparent and simple for parents to understand. But so that's how campus overall rating calculations, and that's not different. So this methodology is unchanged. A big change, however, and we've known about this one, is the district rating. Okay, so before, the district used to go through the same methodology here that campuses would go through. But now the district is not going to go through a calculation in that way, right? Determining, adding up all of the students and figuring out their STAR, their CCMR, their graduation, their progress, et cetera. Now the district is going to be just based on the sum of the campuses and their contribution. All right, and this is a proportional weighting methodology. So they're going to calculate the proportional weighting of campuses. So in this scenario, we have a district has 5 campuses. So they're going to take the 3 through 12 enrollment and count that up. So campus 1 has 334 students, campus 2 has 990, campus 3 has 62, so on and so forth. And then sum that up. So what is the total district enrollment for 3 through 12? And in this case, it's 2,417. So this is a very small district. And so in order to determine how much weight should the campus account for, they're going to take the campus's enrollment and divide by the district enrollment. So the 334 divided by the 2,417 gives you the weight for that campus. So campus 1 is 13.8%, campus 2 is 41%, and so on. Those weights are then attached to the scaled score for that campus. So if campus 1 earned an 85, we're only going to multiply the 85 times 13.8%, because that campus only had 334 kids. But for campus 2, who also made an 85, we're going to multiply by a larger weight of 41% because they had 990 students. So that's how the weight is applied to the domain score, and then those values are summed to give the district its scaled score. So in this case, adding up all the campuses would give us a 79. Now, in addition to the changes and the scaling, the TEA has made some, they're going to do some rating adjustments at the end. So I gave another example, but I tried to keep the format the same as what we've been talking about. So in this case, student achievement is a 68, domain 2A is a 70, 2B is a 69, and then domain 3 is a 69. So if we look at 68, 70, and 69, the largest of those 3, remember we picked the largest, is 70. So we're going to weight the 70 with 70% to give us a 49. And then we're going to take the closing the gaps, which is 69, and multiply that by 30% to get 20.7. So when I add that up, I get an overall score that rounds to a 70, and a 70 would be a C. Except for, no. We have an adjustment to make here. Because if we look back before we do any of the weighting, even though the 68 and the 69 from domain 1 and 2B were not used in the calculation, we're going to look at them and evaluate, wait, of the 4 domains, there are 3 Ds here. So even though mathematically you have earned a 70, you have not. You are dropped down to a 69. You did not get a C, even though mathematically you did. You are now a D. This is, yes, this is the 3D rule. We also have this 3F rule. So the exact kind of same situation, but with the different values. So 59 for domain 1, 58 for 2A, 60 for 2B, and a 59 for domain 3. The best of the first 3 is a 60. I would weight that 70% and get 42. Domain 3, I would weight by 30%, get 17.7. So mathematically, I round to a 60, and I'm a D. Except for I have to go back and look at my 4 domains, and oh no, I have a 59, a 58, and a 59. So I have 3 Fs. So even though mathematically I earned a 60, I'm dropped down to a 59, and even though I earned a D, I don't get it, I'm dropped down to an F. So there's that 3F rule has been in place. So that one's not new, but the 3D rule is a change. So moving past the rating, RDA has been is another accountability system that TEA keeps track of, and it's been separate from A to F for a very long time. They are phasing that in to A to F, so it's going to be report only. There's going to just be an RDA report attached to the A to F report. It will have no impact on any of the math that we just discussed for the first 5 years, and then it's only calculated at the district level, so campuses won't receive an individual attached report. So, but it's a slight change to, well, not slight, it's a change to how they're doing those 2 different accountability systems, trying to merge them into one. So now we've kind of I've gone over the system, I've gone over the calculations, and let's move into our ability to make comparisons with the 2023 refreshed system, which is still proposed. It's not final, so more changes could come. And so when that happens, we will obviously bring that to y'all's attention. But before we get there, because they're not going to finalize the manual until September, I want to talk to y'all about the changes to the system and then other things that impact our comparative ability. So we obviously have our A to F refresh impacts, and so you saw some of that here, and we discussed a little bit of that, but the strenuous scaling adjustments specifically to CCMR, graduation, academic growth, and relative performance. So those have all been, bar has been set higher on those. The aggressive student group target changes for domain 3, specifically to earn 4 full points, you have to reach what we would expect you to reach in 2038. That's pretty intense. And then the additional restrictions and adjustments to the overall rating determinations based on the 3D, 3F rule, et cetera. So those are some impacts on our comparative ability between this year's scores and last year's scores. Okay. Additional impacts not related to the system have also occurred. So the TELPAS redesign, they're not able to even pull in the writing portion completely for TELPAS because that has changed. So we're only pulling in 3 aspects of TELPAS into this year's accountability. They're talking about giving writing as a bonus, but no, that has not been finalized. CCMR category criteria changes. The bringing in military, I mean, that is a positive change. Unfortunately, the phasing in of the program of study is going to make that particular category more difficult to achieve. So additionally, the STAR online administration, so students it's required that you test online. The research doesn't show a difference between the way students perform on paper or online, but there could be a psychological impact that people think is there, and so it's a change. And then, of course, the STAR redesign is a large change. So the test that was used in 2022 is different than the test that is used in 2023. Now, TEA psychometricians are able to run an equating process to where that's not completely different, but it is still a change, and it doesn't, so just wanted to note. But because of the changes to the system and then changes to the things going into the system, it's a little difficult to look at 2022 and compare that to how I did in 2023. So it's possible for a campus that was an A last year in 2022 for the students at that campus this year to improve in 2023 and then receive a B rating because of all the changes to the system. So it's like apples to oranges. And so Commissioner Morath has spoken to school personnel about this and said, we know it's apples to oranges. We know we don't want you making those comparisons, but we know y'all are gonna compare to something, and so we're gonna help you compare to something. So they wanted to give us an apples to apples comparison. So what they did was they created what if values so that we would have that comparative ability. They took our 2022 results, the test results, and they applied the 2023 A to F methodology to the 2022 results to produce a score. Now, no 2022 ratings are actually going to change. This is just to help districts and campuses know how to compare with two different systems. Well, don't compare to two different systems. Compare to this what if value had this 2023 system been in place last year. That's what they wanted us to be able to do. So this lovely little visual shows, it's kind of like going to the grocery store and buying ingredients. And you give those ingredients to a chef who has their own recipe. And one chef, if I take the path on the top end, comes up with a 3-tier cake with the ingredients that we purchased. Take that same bag of ingredients, give it to another chef, following the path on the bottom here, and that chef might not have as good of a recipe, or maybe he was only using a teaspoon instead of a cup of the same ingredients, and we end up with one cupcake. So same ingredients, same bag of ingredients, different chefs, different recipes, we get very different outcomes. So that's what we noticed from our actual 2022 ratings to the what if ratings. So we received our what if values, and I'm going to share that with y'all. But I wanted to inform you, we received the what if ratings, and in our department, at Research and Accountability Department, we have an internal projection process. We also run a validation on the data files that TEA gives us. We like to know before TEA tells us what our rating is, basically. Okay, so we have that process, and we received the what if values, and we took our 2022 data files, which we'd had. We ran them through our SSIS package to produce our projections of the 2022 results with the 2023 methodology. And our values were different than TEA's what if values for our high school campuses, which really freaked us out because we were like, this is what's wrong. What did we do wrong? We were thinking, okay, let's go back and look through the code. Let's figure this out. We had to have missed something somewhere. And so scoured through all of that. Took a very long time to do that. And nothing was wrong that we could find. So we emailed TEA and said, hey, what's going on here? Our what if values for our high schools are different than the what if values that y'all published to us. And we noticed that the way we were doing it was different than the way that TEA had calculated it for our high school retesters. But even so, there weren't large differences between their what if and our what if, but the retesters were causing it to be slightly off. And then so TEA said, we'll get back to you on that. And then they got back to us. Well, actually, they didn't get back to us. We got back to them and said, do you have an answer yet? And then the next week we said, do you have an answer yet? We really want to know. And they ended up saying, well, we had some incorrect logic for our retesters. We're fixing that. So they're going to have to republish the what if values that they published across the state because they had an error in their code. And so we were happy to help them catch that. So, all right. However, since they have still yet to republish based on the correction of the logic to the retesters, which should not make a large difference, y'all. It's not like, we had a 80 for a high school and they had a 70. It was maybe 1 or 2 points. Retesters, they were not making a huge difference, but it was a difference, and we don't like that. So, so the overall what if rating changes based on the incorrect logic here are Our district was an 85, okay? We earned an 85 last year in 2022. But based on the what-if rating calculation, our district would have been a 74 and would have earned a C instead of a B, an 11-point drop. Now, maybe when they add in the retesters, that will be a 75, and it would only be a 10-point drop. That's still a letter grade decrease. Again, same data, just different systems that are caused. So one gave us an 85, the other gave us the little cupcake. So the average rating change for our high school campuses was a drop of 5 points. For our junior highs was a drop of 1. And then for our elementary schools, an average drop of 4 from what we actually did with what the what-if value became. And so I'm not going to give you this all 75 campuses in this PowerPoint, and I didn't want to give you those until they were actually corrected. But so what ends up happening here is we have our 2022 rating on the left here, and then the 2022 what-if rating along the top. Okay, so if you follow this, basically we had 13 A's last year, the 12 and the 1. With the what if, we only had 12 A's, and one of those A's drops to a B. Okay. We had 35 B campuses last year. That was actually our ratings for 35 of our campuses. 24 of those stayed a B. 3 of those actually moved up and earned an A, which you can see that's reflected in that nice green shade there. However, 6 of those B's became a C, and 2 of those B's became a D. We had 15 campuses that earned a C last year. Only 6 of those stay a C with the what-if scenario. 5 of them dropped to a D, 4 of them dropped to an F. And then we had 4 D campuses last year. Only 1 of them remained a D, 3 of them became Fs with the what-if scenario. So the applying the 23 methodology with the exact same data drops a lot of our campus ratings, and then the average of our campus scores. So we'll update this and then let y'all know if it is any better when they do the retester, update that retester logic, and then republish. We're looking forward to that. Here's a timeline just to kind of show you where we are. So we've already gone past the June 30th. August 11th, which is next Friday, we get our star 3 through 8 data file, and so we are ready to receive that file because we want to start running our own process. And then early September, well, it says early September, the final manual will be published, and then we won't get the official ratings from TEA until September 26th, and then they'll be posted on TEA's website on September 28th. So that is my portion of the presentation. And so Dr. Buell will come up and talk about the district approach to student learning regardless of any of this accountability business, because we're here to ensure that students learn.
All right, thank you, Dr. Lopez, and thank you, school board members, and thank you for allowing me to be here tonight. So now we get to talk about the fun stuff, and that is what are we doing in response to that, and what are we doing to accelerate our students' learning? So the real question is, how does all of this inform the priority work that we have? We have been talking a lot, and we're committed about accelerating student learning. So as I share with you today, you're gonna notice that I'm not going to say a lot about new initiatives, and that's intentional. We know from our teachers that we already have effective strategies in place, and we're focusing on how the system can best support the teachers to effectively implement those strategies to accelerate the learning for our students. Such strategies as small group instruction, teacher planning, targeted intervention, we want to keep doing those, but we want to make sure we're doing them in the most effective way and that we're providing the necessary supports for our teachers so that they can execute on those. So we're trying to simplify our approach. Dr. Lopez indicated that our current practices, and we know this, are bringing about positive impacts for our kids. We want to make sure that we continue to leverage what we know is working, and then we also want to engage in a refinement process. Many times, and we're going to talk about this as we go, it's the implementation. It may not be the strategy, it can be the failed implementation, or the lack of support. So we're really trying to be methodical about how we're going about that. So what we'll focus on is identifying the high leverage strategies that are having a positive impact in the district. We want to ensure that the identified strategies are implemented with fidelity. We want to engage in the continuous improvement process to monitor the implementation, and we want to measure the impact of those expected outcomes along the way. As part of this process, we are also committed to identifying those strategies that are not making a positive impact and engage in the practice of strategic abandonment. This will free up teachers to focus on what matters most and accelerating the learning for our students. This will be the process and is the focus of our work as we embark on the 2023-24 school year. So this is a house that we've used to talk about our work this year and to create the vision for how we move forward. This is our house, and I'm going to talk about that house. As a system, we can do anything, but we can't do everything. And we're really talking a lot about that as we move through this. We're working diligently to focus on a system-wide strategies that make the greatest impact on student learning. We're emphasizing, again, the fidelity of implementation of those strategies. Many times, it's not the strategy that leads to less than expected outcomes, it's the implementation. We have a commitment to focus on the fidelity of implementation of the high leverage strategies that are identified. This includes examining the types of supports from our stakeholders to be able to effectively implement those. So if you look at the bottom, we're really talking about what supports are high leverage and should yield the best outcomes for students. We want to ground that in because we can't focus on everything, and we want to continue with what we started. We had a strong focus on Tier 1 and math and reading last year. We'll continue that focus this year. We believe that's the strong foundation that every student needs. Not ignoring everything else, but we're really going to focus strategically on that reading and math. If I take you to the left-hand side, it talks about the assessment and the progress monitoring. Each of our campuses have worked in collaboration with their instructional leadership team this year. We've done a lot of work over the summer on this, and they've developed a progress monitoring system to measure student growth throughout the year. We implement formative assessments and tools and strategies, and what we've done is tried to really bring those into a progress monitoring system. Engage staff in doing that. Campus has had a lot of autonomy in what that looked like as we guided them through that process so that they can understand how to measure that progress throughout the school year and make instructional adjustments throughout the year, mid-course adjustments, in order to, and I'm going to take you to the right-hand side, provide those differentiated interventions. That MTSS cycle allows us to look at the student data that we're getting real time with kids throughout the year and make informed decisions that impact teaching and learning and ultimately the enrichment or the intervention that we can provide a student, all with the goal of having increased student achievement. So this is our house, and it grounds us in our work as we move forward this year. Again, all of the campuses have worked collaboratively with their leadership team to develop this. It'll be an ongoing process this year. It'll be one that's supported from a district level. It'll be one that's supported through the executive directors. We want them to really use this as a tool to identify those students who really need to have their learning accelerated. And the tools we've got, we believe, will help them to know what the right instructional moves are to help our students. So we're going to talk about, we can't talk about everything today, but we're going to talk about the 4 big rocks around strategically aligned supports that we're focusing on right now. And so with these, we want to focus on what matters most to student achievement. We can focus on a lot of things. We believe these are things that will yield good outcomes, strong outcomes, will not overwhelm the system, and that if we do well, will increase student achievement. We're going to plan the implementation based on cross-departmental support and really listen. We've gotten a lot of feedback from stakeholders about sometimes it's not the strategy, but it's the support you need to effectively execute. So we want to lean into that, and we want to make sure that we've got an implementation plan that includes support from all areas of the district in order to help ultimately the classroom teacher to execute on that strategy. That'll be an ongoing process for us. We want to engage in progress monitoring throughout the year to evaluate and measure the attainment of expected outcomes while being committed to making mid-course adjustments that will yield better outcomes for our students. This is also going to help us in that strategic abandonment process. It's difficult. You don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, especially if it's a great strategy, but the failure was in the implementation. So our commitment is to go slow. Our commitment is to be methodical with this and to be very data-driven in our approach, to look at it from a system level as well as a campus level, and try to make very strategic decisions. So this time next year, we won't be having the same discussion. We'll be able to really make some informed decisions as we move forward. And then identify strategies that are not yielding the results, and then modify or abandon those strategies. Which brings us into the updated CLP. I am super excited about this. I don't know if you've gotten to see a copy of the new version, but it really is a reflection of a lot of the feedback that we got. Again, not a new strategy. This was one of our Focus 5. We had it last year. We don't want to change that because our teachers, really, we got a lot of good feedback. We also got feedback on what we can improve. The new CLP and CMP, it's been updated to include district-aligned resources that are embedded into the document so that teachers can easily access information that supports the planning process. We got a lot of feedback, and I can tell you, read through all of it. It's nice. You're reading along and you want an example of a phonics lesson, you can click on there. It'll even give you some videos. It'll take you to the curriculum document. It really is a one-stop shop to help our teachers really understand the curriculum resources we have in the district. I think they've done an excellent job on that. We have set a cadence this year to continue to get feedback on that. It's a document that's live, so we can go in and make changes to that in real time as we receive feedback, or we design additional resources that make it more user-friendly for our teachers. Based on the teacher feedback and review of the current best instructional practices in reading, the new edition of the Comprehensive Reading Literacy Plan is also more closely aligned with the science of teaching reading. All of our K-3 teachers have been engaging in the Reading Academy. And through that, all of our administrators as well, we learned that we needed to go back and do some revisions and bring that into better alignment. So we've gone through a revision process that included, our curriculum instruction department, our teachers in giving feedback, and we believe that we have now a document where we're not teaching one thing and asking them to do another. We've really tried to marry those two things in a way that's best for instruction for kids. The impact on development of high-quality Tier 1 instruction has been addressed through providing additional curricular resources that the teachers will be able to leverage during planning processes. This is in progress, but we do have some plug-and-plays. We have some example activities so that if a teacher's planning, they can click on an activity. It is not meant to say, here, teacher, this is a cookie cutter. We want you to go and implement this. But what it will do is give you a frame of reference. You can go and see an example, and hopefully that's going to get your brain flowing and you're able to use the resources that we have there and then more easily plan lessons. So that's the goal. The Curriculum Instruction Department will continue to add to that each 6 weeks this year. I will also give an update on the CMP, and I think it's probably, there are a lot of updates, and I think you'll enjoy looking through it. But one of the pieces of feedback we got, just because of the transiency of our kids, and also as they go up through the system, is how do we keep that continuity of learning? So the district has developed a district problem-solving model in mathematics. This includes reading and understanding the problem formulating a plan, a strategy to solve the problem, and determining a solution. And you may think, okay, but when teachers across the district do that very different, and I'm moving from school to school, or I go from second grade and my teacher teaches it this way, and then I move to third and I've got to do a hard right turn, it's confusing. So we're focusing on what is the way that we're going to teach that is the Arlington way. So we landed on that with a lot of input again, and we're creating posters that will go up in every classroom, and we're going to ask teachers to lean into that. Teachers naturally may use an alternative way. We want kids to be able to solve it multiple ways, right? But we want to ground the learning in a way that if a student transitions, they don't lose the learning and they become confused. We also, the math department has also been doing a lot of training and providing resources for teachers. You'll see it in the CMP related to numeracy strategies such as number talks, number corner, giving some examples of concrete representational and abstract to help a teacher as they're planning those lessons. And so we feel like those are going to be tools that are going to help our teachers as they're planning for mathematics. So this is one that I think we're going to get a lot of additional feedback that's really good. We've involved principals in this, teacher focus groups to try to understand how we can best help. We know that the teacher has the greatest impact on student learning, and we're asking our teachers to do really important work. And we do believe that it's critical to protect that teacher planning time. We have great teachers in Arlington, and we want to support them in this planning process so that they can plan the most effective lessons for our students. So we've really dove into our elementary schedule. We know we have extra planning time at the junior high and the high school, but it's been something that's difficult. I've been at elementary for a long time, and it's difficult to get it within our parameters, but we believe we've landed on something that is going to be mutually beneficial for all of our campuses. So all campuses are building a schedule that includes a weekly PLC time for our core teachers outside of the planning time. So we have that, and it can be done. So we've trained our principals on that. We've asked them to engage their instructional leadership teams in developing that. We haven't said, you have to do it this way. We gave them parameters. Number one parameter, we want to pull the PLC out of that, and we want to protect that planning time. There are some other things that get in the way in planning time, and this isn't a science, y'all, but it's in the spirit of this is what we need to do. We know every once in a while there's a parent that's the only time they can come up. And, a teacher certainly would go and meet with them. So we're working with principals on those sorts of things. This is what I told the principals. That should be the exception and not the rule. And we talked about ways to give back that planning time as well. So, what I would ask our campuses, what I would ask our principals is, do sense making on your campus as you roll this out, but let's do everything we can to make sure that we have that teacher planning time protected on the campuses. And we will continue to work with that. Our executive directors are committed to working with principals, being thought partners with them, because if it was easy, we would have done it years ago, right? But there are some ways to do that. Again, we've given campuses, on the PowerPoint I trained them on, we had an option A, we had an option B, two great ways to work. Option C was, principal, if you have another way that you believe meets these parameters on your campus, come and talk to us about it. We're going to operate in the spirit of yes, and we will approve it as long as it meets these parameters. So, but we also felt like we needed to help them come up with some options if you can't get there, because it took a lot of heads to get to option A and B. All right, so super excited about that, and we will continue to work with that as a system, because I think that is going to be critical to us achieving the goals we want to achieve. So the next one is coaching and feedback. Again, I committed to y'all at the beginning, you're not going to hear a lot of new, and we're not. So we'll continue with coaching and feedback in the district. I think we are very lucky to have an instructional coach at each of our campuses. We have a cultural tenet in our district of growing and developing people. This will continue to be an area of focus. We have sought feedback, and we will continue to seek feedback on this because we want to make sure that that coaching is as impactful as it can be. So one of the things we've done this year is we've worked with our coaches. We have one instructional coach, and in some cases, a lot of teachers that can really use it. So we've asked them, and they're in the process of doing that, tiering the teachers. Let's focus that support. We've got bridge teachers who, I can't imagine, they have a big learning curve, and we want to give them support to get there. So they're going to focus on bridge teachers. They're going to focus on new teachers. They're going to focus on our teachers that are new to AISD. I've transitioned into a couple districts, and sometimes I tell people it's kind of like a foreign language, like you just have to translate. But having that support by you to do that and learn the Arlington way, get familiar with the resources, is super helpful. So we want to prioritize those three. Does that mean that any other teacher doesn't have access? No, not at all. It's a campus decision. We'll work through that. Every teacher would certainly have the support of our coaches through planning, data meetings, PLCs. Again, that schedule's made at the campus. Our instructional coaches have the support of their central office coaches to help make sure that we set out on a coaching cadence and schedule that best benefits teaching and learning on the campus. So we're focusing on that this year with our coaching. And the last, I guess this is, maybe a little new, but it's not new. What it is it's taking what we've already done in the district and said, maybe we can use MAP. We're already doing MAP, our NWEA MAP. It's a formative assessment that we use, right? It's a screener. So there's nothing new within the progress monitoring system. What this is saying, campus, how do you make sure that when you implement NWEA MAP, that you have a cycle of continuous improvement and progress monitoring on your campus with all of the necessary stakeholders to make sure that you're using that data to inform instruction and to do targeted interventions. And with a lot of feedback, that we believe that was a missing piece on many campuses. Sometimes you get going fast and they take it, but then do you really sit down and examine those in a very methodical way? Do you coach on that and help to support these teachers in understanding what does that data mean, and so then how do I use it to inform instruction? And then when we give the interventions, do we stop and look if those interventions are even making a difference before we get to the end of the year? That's what this is about. Campuses, again, and I think this is important, we coached principals on how to develop a progress monitoring system and what it meant. We then are providing support through the executive directors to the principals to go back into the progress monitoring system and make sure it makes sense. And then they will get coaching on that through the year. And I think the good part of that is we didn't say, campuses, you had to do this and this is the day and all, because you don't get buy-in. This is built from the ground up at every campus, and I think we will have greater buy-in. Will some of them be a little bit stronger than another? Yeah, maybe so. But we're going to learn lessons through this as we go through the year. And at the end of the year, when we start training on it for next year and reflecting, we'll certainly know things that worked and didn't work. And I think every campus will be further along because of that process. In addition to that, we are committing to have a district level committee where we're doing the same thing simultaneously. So when we get our NWE map, we have a cross-departmental team that will come together and do our own progress monitoring, because we want to look at, is it implementation? Is it support? What does the data mean across the district? And how might that have implications for, say, curriculum and development or support that we need or professional learning? So we'll be engaging in that process as well. And then I know Dr. Wirtz has the expectation that we also do it as a senior staff. So we've talked about, how we're continually monitoring that data as we go throughout the year. I promised you nothing new. I think I held to my promise. Again, we've tried to narrow the focus and really think about how can we go deeply with the implementation and the effectiveness to yield outcomes for students. And with that, we'll open it up to questions.
Dr. Reich?
Thank you, President Fowler. Dr. Buell, Dr. Lopez, thank you for just such a brief little overview of everything.
Mine wasn't nearly as complicated as Dr. Lopez's.
So while you're there, I just want to say I love what I'm hearing. I think these things are huge for the district, for the morale of teachers, for the toolkit of teachers to not just press pause, but to strategically align what the priority focus points are going to be, simplifying that whole approach. That's amazing. That's wonderful. For many, many years, we've had great thoughts, great ideas. Let's do this, let's do this, let's do this. And the teachers are on the receiving end of all of that. So ultimately, this is going to be great for students. So I think it's wonderful having the resources, the comprehensive literacy, math, that's wonderful as well. And protecting planning time, wow. I have been hearing about that literally since my first day on the board in 2009. So kudos to you, your team, Dr. Wirtz. These are huge pieces. So if I were a teacher, I'd be really excited about what this year is going to entail with all of this. So great stuff. Now to Dr. Lopez.
Oh, that's where our exit stage left.
Yes. You do amazing work, and you're, as an individual and your department, is to be commended.
Yeah.
My first thing is, I sure hope that as trustees, we don't have an assessment on your explanations of everything, because we won't be in the top tier, I guarantee I won't. I would also say, our State of the District is tomorrow, Dr. Wirtz. If you include 10% of this, you're going to lose the room. You're all going to leave. So don't go there.
No, there will be way less. It's going to be super simplified.
In listening to everything, I have just a couple of notes. I only have one kind of sort of question. It's mostly, I'm just opining up here. The first thing, there are projections that STAR's still going to be around in 2038. I think that's kind of funny. Yeah, sure, I have 2038 written down here. In your explanation on Domain 3A, what I thought there would be wonderful is to have that on a high speed, on a YouTube, a super high speed, like the disclaimers on commercials and things, and then slow it down at the end where you say, and this is to be super easy and explanatory for parents as A through F. I mean, that's literally the system, and that's just the one domain piece. Yeah, it's disappointing to see just how ridiculous this has gotten. It really is. So I guess I have two questions. One that I picked up on when you were talking about the distinctions of the district and versus campuses, how the district's going to be graded or how that's all going to be calculated, and what the campus percents are going to be. There's nothing in there about the type of campus, the socioeconomic, ECODIS, any of that to be included in part of that simple calculation, correct?
Right.
So it's not really equitable. It's not fair because you can, in theory, have several ECODIS campuses that might skew that. They might should be adjusted or weighted at a different level than a campus that isn't as highly ECODIS, or vice versa, or whatever you think, or?
Well, it does not take socioeconomic into consideration for the weighting, the proportional weighting methodology. You are absolutely correct in that. The economically disadvantaged percentage of campuses is taken into consideration for 2B. So when 2B is weighted, it could be reflected there if that ends up being the district's better of 1, 2A, or 2B. That's where that would come into play. But that's the only part where it would.
Yeah. And as far as the system itself, with it being 100% star for elementary, I mean, that's nothing new. It's disappointing.
Yeah.
It's absolutely disappointing. Kudos to you all for catching the error.
Yeah.
Maybe we can get
My-
some extra accountability points for that.
My team is the best. I mean, they're just fantastic.
Yeah. So ultimately, as complex as all this was, and I know it's a cursory overview, literally, what you provided, it's not necessarily a surprise. We've all been predicting and saying that overlaid the new system, we're going to look like we suck compared to the year before. Just
Yep.
putting it out there in a
Yep.
very rude way. What is being done, or what has been done, and this might not be for you, it might be for Dr. Wirtz, I don't know, to prepare our teachers and our campuses for this bombshell that is likely to hit, as well as the community, but I'm more interested, this is going to be, these are released so late this year, school's in session, everybody's trying, and then they're going to get hit with this, and morale, I mean, deflation, wind out of the sail, et cetera. So what are we doing?
So I think the first thing is we're transparent with data with campuses as soon as we receive it and it's calculated and we're ready to share things with. But honestly, what we've done in the initial onset is just to tell principals, and I personally did this, is to take heart. Don't lose heart over it, because there are actually some positive things that the numbers aren't initially going to show the public that people need to think about. Because when you take our initial analysis of just the high schools, because we haven't gotten all the results back, and you compare apples to apples, while the 2022 scores drop a little bit, or drop, when you compare them to 2023, those same high schools are now on a positive trajectory upward. So just because the rating may drop, meaning the letter grade may drop or the score may drop, does not actually indicate that your kids are not improving. And I think that's the message that we're trying to help principals to know and understand. We'll know more about 3 through 8 once those come through. And also to make sure that we help teachers make sense of that. Because you're right, it can be very discouraging when a school is labeled with a specific letter grade and the letter grade doesn't even tell a fraction of the story, when improvement actually is happening. So I think it's going to take effort on all of our parts to do 2 things. One is keep it really, really simple. You're going to hear this bakery kind of scenario over and over and over again to make it simple for people to understand. And then also help them to realize that just because the letter grade dropped in the new system doesn't actually mean improvement isn't happening with kids, and to keep heart, keep at it. That's been the message that we've been trying to articulate specifically with principals, because as everybody knows, everyone's working really hard. Kids are actually getting better. It's just the system's not interpreting it that way initially, and we have to help people keep sense of that. So it's over and over and over again. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I'm really concerned that our teachers are just going to feel so deflated. And it'll carry on to our students as well, and that will impede all these great plans that Dr. Buell laid out for this year. It's going to slow the process. So whatever we can do in a concise campaign, and this is inter-district as well as our community. Our community is going to hear the example 85 to 75 or 76, whatever it turns out, and that's all they're going to hear. So I really encourage that we come up with, however possible, a 3 to 4 sentence quick clip soundbite of what it is. Any longer than that, it's not going to stick, and that's all we're going to hear out there is the drop, the drop, the drop, when there really isn't a drop. So from a governance level, I really appreciate the overview. Dr. Buell, the progress monitoring, the tweaks to it, that's everything. There are so many systems that get put into place in industries where they don't do that dynamic follow-up and follow-through. And can tell you as a healthcare professional, if that's how we rolled in healthcare, there'd be a lot more bodies laying around. So I think that's really strategically smart to help our teachers, ultimately help our students. Thank you both. Thank you for all of the work, and I just can't even imagine what water cooler talk is like on your floor. But thank you for everything. We'll see what the results are when they actually come out in mid to late this month at best, which is astounding to me. That's the latest I've ever heard of this happening. Like you said, there might even be some more tweaks. This isn't even the final. So thank you for dealing with all of this for us, and as complex as it was, boiling it down to a level that is digestible for all of us. But a 2 to 3 sentence soundbite, I think, is really important to get the word out to the community to prep them. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Reich. Mr. Wilbanks?
Thank you, President Fowler. And Dr. Rice, you're absolutely hit the nail on the head, because getting the communication out on this is going to be key. Like you said, we're going to lose them and they're just going to see the drop. But whatever we can do to get a simple soundbite out, and not only that, but a whole communication campaign, so parents are ready and know that, look, this doesn't, like you said, for staff, it doesn't mean that your kids aren't advancing, they're not regressing. This is just a complete overhaul with a whole different set of measures. But kids are still learning, they're doing great. It's in the irony that, they simplify down through an A through F, but it's really, they've made it more complicated, and you said it's not a complete picture of the campus. It's more than this one letter grade, but yet they've overly complicated that one letter grade, and to deleterious effect on districts like ourselves. Speaking of which, going back, when you gave us this briefing at the end of last year on the quote refresh, which we should never use the term refresh. This is not a refresh. It's a major frickin' overhaul. But domain 3, I didn't quite understand then, or maybe it wouldn't, all the details weren't there when you gave it on, if you could pull up that slide.
Sure. Yes, sir.
On the graduated outcomes. Getting close.
Yes. Oh,
Yep.
okay.
So, you know me, I'm a data nerd, so I've worked through a lot of state data star results, and there are a lot of A-rated campuses that are meeting that I'm sure are meeting the 2037, 2038 target right now and are going to get 4 points. Well, do you know what those districts look like? Do you know the demographics of those districts? They're all lily white, and they're all like minimal echo discs, the Highland Parks, the Planos of the world. So this, to me, seems like it's creating now I know domain 3 is 30% weight, but still, this is giving an increased advantage to those schools that already have a huge advantage because of how much of a head start those kids start day one of kindergarten with, and all through their academic career. And the same thing, you're going to see the same thing, and I think it's pretty telling. We have a very diverse population of campuses in terms of echo discs and highly rated. And if you kind of go from that slide, whoops, sorry, I'm losing it. The one where you did the what, hold on.
Okay.
The one where you did the what if on our campuses that were A-rated, the campus overall rating changes.
Yes.
So we have a lot of highly rated campuses. We know elementary schools, we know where they are. You look at the effect of this new system, major overhaul, the A-rated campuses are hardly impacted at all.
Right.
Look who's really impacted. Our struggling campuses that are highest economically disadvantaged. It's going to widen the gap. How fair is that? I guess enough said.
Yeah.
But kudos to your team. It is kind of good to see the impact of this at a campus level. The other thing I was concerned with is the overall district grade, and the way they do the weighted averages now has proven out where we have 11-point gap in a whole letter grade affected for our district, but where, you know, kind of the average of where our campuses are, they're not going to be impacted as much, and they're going to go down by, just kind of looking here, about 6 points, right, on average, whereas the district's going to go down probably 11 points, maybe. So, you know, when people look at Arlington ISD, you know, you can't tell me that if individual campuses are really not affected that much, that are only affected by half as much as what we as a district are going to be, that that's a fair system. So anyway, enough on my soapbox. Kudos to your team again for all the hard work. The one real question I have for you is, in years past, when the new A through F system came in, I think we did a really good job of reflecting of what all goes into the score, and obviously you guys still master that, and looking at which levers, which of these 4 domains and components that go into each domain do we have low-hanging fruit in terms of improvement. Back then, it was CCMR. We went from a C to a B pretty easily because we were able to adjust for what we were doing programmatically, but also based on what is actually being measured to make significant gains on CCMR. Given this new system, I know it's more complex and harder to do, but have you guys already identified areas in these components that make up these that are target areas for us to improve, either programmatically or by, you know, what we're doing and how we're measuring things?
Well, we do not have our complete data, so no, we have not made it to that point. So
Okay.
we receive our final data file next Friday. And then so we'll actually be able to finish out our projection process.
I guess my question was more on the projections you have done and knowing what the design of this new system is, areas where we know we're going to have low-hanging fruit to go after to boost the score.
I think so, as far as like the high school data, is that what you're referring to?
Or
Because we receive.
at any level.
So we do have high school data, we have our CCMR and TELPAS, and so we have not done analysis on the individual pieces, but as far as high schools, we looked at the breakdown on the subjects, and then CCMR also, the breakdown in the categories, where are we seeing growth? For example, if AP or IB category for the past 5 years, we've had the same percentage of students accomplishing that. You really wouldn't want to see a plateau effect. You'd want to see that increasing, that particular subcategory for CCMR. And so, yes, we're working with the different program owners on the pieces that we acknowledge, kind of giving the information and then allowing the program owner to make necessary changes based on that.
I think what you're referring to a little bit is what we like to call like the quickest path. Like that's
Yes.
like what do you need to do to move your score? It's a little more complex now simply because some of the things that we really tried to get to were these big rocks that you said. So I'll give you an example. Last year with 2022, everyone could see clearly that the opportunity was sitting in growth.
Yeah.
So we looked, I mean, the team worked really hard to find exactly what number point or what score does each kid need in order to move and show growth. And that worked really, really well, and they showed growth. It worked well within the system. And then CCMR is another great example, and that was a lesson hard learned several years ago. We try to be up in front of it right now. So last year, the whole team was working really, really hard to mitigate and make sure that we were bringing our schools as close to this new scale score for CCMR for next year. Challenge is that you're rated using the CCMR results from the year before. So I think the thing that we're working on is just trying to, one, understand like where do all the chips fall? And then once they fall, where do we find is the most advantageous entry point to try to make the biggest difference to show how a result reflects what kids are actually doing. But it's kind of preliminary right now because we just need to let all the numbers come in and see
Kinda
really
let the
did the
chips
what
fall.
if actually pan out the way we thought it would, or is it a little bit different? And then at that point, you can look at the district and see kind of where are what are potentially large opportunities at the system level. But the best way to really get down to that question is there opportunities at the individual schools and what are they? So that's like Natalie said, we're still very much in the front side of that. I think we'll have more answers to that as we move more closer into September. It may be just keep on trucking. We might not have those big rocks that existed at the very, very beginning because we worked hard to solve some of those at the beginning. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah. No, that was a good answer. Thank you, Dr. Wertz. And Dr. Lopez, one thing that I commend you on is that your team has been very good in the past at correlating our progress measures like our CAs, and we know we're now on NWEA MAP, which is highly correlated to the STAR. If it's the STAR from years past. Now that it's been overhauled, how much of a challenge, being that those two things have been our biggest tool to know and predict exactly how well we're going to do on STAR before kids even sit down and take that test. Are we hamstrung in using those progress measures as a predictive tool like that now?
No, so now that we have, this last year was difficult, actually. Knowing that the test was going to be redesigned, but having to try and use MAP or our internal equating process to come up with a projected value. That was actually difficult, not knowing exactly how the STAR redesign data was going to look. But now that we've gone through this, we will have our STAR data file. We will have results from the STAR redesign. So this year will actually be easier for us to then run our process. I would think that for MAP, it would be the same thing for their psychometric team to be able to make those performance level correlations. Yeah, I mean, and what I think, we're looking forward to actually doing an analysis on the MAP projections from 2023, and then what actually ended up happening, because they were kind of in the same scenario that we were in. So we're obviously going to do that with our own data, but we want to do that with the MAP data, and so we're looking forward to doing that.
Yeah.
So.
Good. I've got a long list, but I promised Leanne that I would be brief, so I'm going to edit some of them out. I'll ask offline. But no, it is a lot written here because like Dr. Reich, I loved what I was hearing. And again, your team is very adroit on top of things in terms of analyzing this, coming down to actually finding TEA's own errors. So we're very lucky to have you and your team. So thank you. I guess so I can be brief. I'll turn it over to Dr. Buell because she said a lot of great things. So, Dr. Buell. I like the number one, right off the bat, you recognize the need to simplify things. So kudos to that. And number two, to listen to the stakeholders, i.e. the teachers and our instructional teams, on being more effective. And I think you've just won a whole group of people over who are resistant to changes coming down from on high every time we get STAR results or this a new plan. You've already given them agency in the process, and I think that's going to be huge and allow us to work as a team to move forward because we got a lot of heavy lifting to do.
Sure.
So kudos to you. I like that you've updated our instructional guides. They're now better in alignment. So reading between the line, I guess, on the ELA one, it's aligned to the science of reading, and so there's no more mention of balanced literacy? Is that?
There are some people, I always say this, I think I've been at this long enough, we kind of do this throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Water, yep.
So, I mean, if you look through, they weren't terrible practices that we were doing, but we've brought that into alignment, and I would like to say we've kept the best of all of it, and things that we know work with kids and their sound teaching practices. So yes, I think we've addressed it so that our teachers that are going through this learning that we're investing in, they're like, this is relevant, this is what I'm learning about, yes.
Yeah, so that's great. The biggest win, I think, is we all know that when PLCs are implemented with fidelity, they make a difference.
Absolutely.
And when teachers are given time to do DDI, high lever strategy, and the effective school framework, right?
Yes.
It's there for a reason, but they got to have time to do that.
Right.
And, Dr. Wirtz and I were talking the other day about, PLCs is kind of just a name for a slot on a schedule of a calendar for teachers.
Right.
They're not actually, I wonder how many people are actually really implementing the spirit of PLCs. And the fact that it sounds like we're going to help carve out time and encourage the teams to use it as it was intended, to make those, it's a high leverage strategy that works.
Absolutely.
And so that we're investing in that, we're actually carving out and we're saying this is non-negotiable principles. They need this time that's oftentimes interrupted. So that is huge. Kudos to you guys for that. From a board, we have to adopt, HB3 goals that look at those progress measures, those interim measures along the way. But only when there's a problem do we need to kind of stick our nose in, keep elbows out, and ask, well, what's not working from a strategy standpoint? Right. So you're saying the same tune. You're before you throw the baby out with the bathwater, you're first looking, did we implement the strategy with fidelity? So to answer that, you've got to know what percentage of teachers have been trained on the strategy and what percentage of teachers are implementing it with fidelity. Right. So what process measures, not progress measures, but process measures, and what's the plan to measure that so you can report out on that and answer to Dr. Wirtz when we're like, okay, even though the strategy, all the literature says it's the biggest, highest leverage strategy in the world, why are we not seeing any results from it? Mm-hmm. How are you going to be able to report back to him and say, well, we didn't really implement it with this is the percentage of teachers that are really, how are you going to do that measure, that look for in each classroom effectively across 73 campuses?
Yeah. So we're starting this work, right? And we may not get it all perfect this year, but I think we get closer there when we have a vision for where you want to go. But I think I've been in this position 4 weeks, but I'll take you to NWEA MAP. And when we set out to do our implementation and plan on that, we really broke it down. We had a cross-departmental team together, and we sat down and we broke down, I can't pull it up here because I don't have it, but we broke down what would be expected if we wanted it to be implemented in a way that yielded those outcomes, the outcomes for students. And we worked that all the way back to, there were 4 columns on there, and we said teacher. What is expected of the teacher to implement this? And we went through the entire year. And then in that same box, we put support, and we wouldn't move until we said, if a teacher needs to implement this, what would support look like? And we defined it. So why I can't answer your question is, when I talked about that capacity team at the district, that's our role. We need to go back and look at that plan all year long. And I think we'll have a lot of lessons learned as we go. We'll be better off as a district this time next year having gone through that process. But I don't think I could just jump in and say, I think it's this. So we did that column, and so we started with the teacher, and then we said, okay, if we expect teachers to do this, what is it that the principal has to do in order to support this? Okay? What kind of support does the principal need? To your point with training, We have 14 brand-new principals this year. So we can't just assume they know how to do that. So one of our strategies in there, we've got to figure out how to go back and do what I would call the 101 training, while at the same time you're doing kind of the refresh training for everyone else. So that's embedded in our plan, and we did that for principals. Then we went to the next column and we said, okay, if we expect principals to do this and campuses to do it, what does that look like for the executive directors? Because our executive directors that coach principals and support campuses also have what we call a scope and sequence. What's their body of work? How can they support that as a thought partner? Because as a principal, sometimes that's what you need, is just somebody to pull a chair up next to you and say, let's think about this. So we've got that built into their scope and sequence. And then the last one is central office. When we're doing this progress monitoring, there has to be implications for the greater system work too. So we, in the last column, said if we expect teachers to do this, principals to do this, executive directors, what's the connection for our central office work? How are we using that information to inform our high priority work and how we can best serve our campuses to reach their goals? So we're going slow and methodical with that kind of thinking as we roll it out. Obviously, you can't do that with everything, and that's why we're trying to focus in on what are the most important things that we need to do and do it deep like that. So I'm sorry I don't have any concrete answers. I can describe to you the process we're going through and where we're headed with that.
I can say one thing. One of the things that we're committed as a team is to try to quantify the quality of the implementation. So I'll just use a really quick example. So if we identify high leverage strategies that we know we are training teachers to implement in the classroom, whether it's a component of the science of teaching reading, or we want to be general about what the quality of small group instruction should look like, how do we create a process or a system that calibrates principals
Yes.
so that when they walk into a classroom, they know what to look for.
Yeah.
They can identify whether they're actually seeing those things and what coaching opportunities are there when they don't, or when they do see them, how can they reinforce them in other places? One of the things that we're trying to do is create that system so that it's routine, so that when we actually measure our targets and goals in the district improvement plan, we can actually make a judgment about how much we see. And if we see that it's actually being effective, like we see the implementation because we can quantify it, we have principals and central office, we see it, teachers are reporting it, but the number's not moving in terms of student outcomes, then it makes us think about the strategy. So right now, we're in the process of developing that system so that when we report out to the board every quarter about how we're doing on district improvement process, we can tell you, hey, these are the strategies that we're working on in the classroom, this is how often we're seeing them, these are the schools that we don't see them that often, and this is the relationship between their scores and those strategies. That's the goal.
Yeah, that's awesome. And defining those look-fors are key. But I was fortunate enough to go to Council of Great City Schools. Dr. Wirtz was there last year. And one of the sessions I went to was put on by Minneapolis, where they actually developed once they defined the look-fors for the strategies, they gave the academic leadership team at each campus an iPhone app that they developed in-house. With those look-fors, they could peek in real quick, measure, yes, they're doing first look for, the fourth look through, not the third one, and they could quickly assess and build quantifiable data in each classroom on what how effective the teachers are implementing each of the strategies.
We have that capability in our system. It's a matter of putting defining that rubric or the tool that you're going to use, and then everyone calibrated across it, and then gathering the data. But the system exists in Arlington, ready to be used. Now it's just a matter of designing and implementing the tool. But
that's good to
you're
hear.
reaching. We're actually at that goal.
Good.
Yeah.
That's good to hear. No knock to Dr. Lopez, but she scared me with her presentation with, the bad news. But you've gone a long way to assuaging those fears, allaying those fears. And I feel confident going forward that we're going to really knock it out of the park this year.
That's great.
So thank you,
Excited
Dr.
about the
Bill.
work. Thank you
And
all
thank
for
you
your
too,
support.
Dr. Lopez, for really explaining well just how bad things are.
Thank you, Mr. Wilbanks. Ms. Richardson?
First of all, to our safety officers, thank you guys. I promise we don't always go this long, but thank you. You have sat there and smiled, and I just want you to know that we see you sitting there smiling. Thank you. So to piggyback off of what Dr. Reich said, I am concerned about our stakeholders in the district who maybe don't have kids that attend. Our parents, you're gonna get the information out to our parents, you're gonna get the information out to teachers. What happens to these people who they don't technically, they're not gonna be in a forum or an area to hear it, but they are the ones who pay our tax dollars. They are the ones who vote, who support bonds or don't support bonds, and they are the people that are gonna see these ratings and they're gonna be angry. And that is how word is gonna spread with these stakeholders of, well, our schools, what have we done? You see, we are just not, I mean, I already can picture it in my head. I can already see the Facebook feeds that are gonna fill up with this. So Sarah passed around something a second ago that we looked at. And Mansfield Today put out a thing about the A through F system and explaining it. Could we do something with Arlington today? Can we do something to put information? What can we do to get information in people's hands who don't have a child in this district? And I think that's going to be really important because those are the people who are going to have really loud voices over this. Parents, once they understand, they're going to get it. We're going to get behind you. We're going to support you. I understand this as a mom, but I'm really concerned about what this is going to look like to other people who aren't going to get to hear you guys share this in a concise way. The question that I had for you, Dr. Lopez, when you were talking about the STAR results and when they're coming out, these are coming out later than they have in the past, these STAR results. So as a trustee, it concerns me. As a parent, it concerns me. As a person who has friends who teach. And a lot of times, things change once those results come out for teachers. What is this going to look like with kids starting back to school? I hate to say it, but in like a week and a half. It pains me to say a week and a half. But in a week and a half, when those kids go back and these results come out after the fact, how are we handling that?
So actually, TEA had the same concern, and I'm not quite sure if the process is easier for them, but they are able to upload the scores into the Cambium system.
Okay.
And so they're going to make that available, so parents and, teachers, campus personnel, district personnel, you can log into Cambium and you can see the child's result. Now, that's not as much information as what they have to put in that large data file that they send to the district. So they were able to up that release, and so I believe that comes out tomorrow.
So what support are we going to give our teachers who are receiving this information much later than they're used to? And sometimes they base some of the things they teach around what comes out of this. What support are we giving them as a district?
Dr. Beal, do you want to handle that question?
We do have like their screener data and information that we would have from last year. So you've got prior year data. We'll also start the year with doing our screeners. So they'll have the ability. We also have our USA, so we have our common assessments that they can give. They've got a lot of information that they can lean into as they're starting to assess where their students are and plan for small group instruction and differentiated support. So this, while it is a piece, it's a piece. And I think our teachers, we have enough supports at the campus and enough data that they'll be able to start planning for effective instruction right away. And that would be our charge to them.
Okay. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Ms. Richardson. Ms. McMurrow?
Thank you, Dr. Lopez and Dr. Buell. I just have a couple questions, and I think they'd be appropriate for you, Dr. Buell. Sorry, you just went to go sit down. So I'm excited to dig into the K through 12 comprehensive plans for literacy and math. I also love and it's been said already, but I love the stop piling on more and more new for staff. I love that approach because TEA is moving the goalpost around and piling on more and more and making things more complex, we don't have to let that funnel down to our teachers, because when we give in to that funnels down to our students. Sure. And that's something that we're being really intentional about protecting, and I really appreciate that. And I know that's always the intent, but I love that it's really being prioritized right now more than ever because they need it. I'm curious about the CLP and the CMP. Given that our professional development for beginning of year training is coming up, will those district-wide PD sessions align with the updates?
Yes.
Specifically, science of reading practices and the new math problem-solving method. Are
Yes.
teachers going to get trained?
Yes,
Awesome.
absolutely. So for like elementaries, that'll take place next Tuesday, and if I'm remembering my calendar right, I think high school's Thursday, but don't quote me on that.
Awesome.
But they will have that, and we've been reviewing those presentations. In fact, I just did one of those today, to just take a look at the content and make sure that it's aligned with our strategic focus. They will be walking through, the CLP and helping teachers to understand. So many times, I'll hear a request for a resource, and I'm thinking, we've got it, but how easy and user-friendly are we making that? And I believe curriculum instruction has done an excellent job of that. It's interesting. We even have a one-pager I was going over with them today, and I was like, I think we should add that to the CLP. But it's a one-page document, and it says, if you use this resource, this is where you find it, and this is what it's used for. I'm like, I love it. It just simplifies things, and I don't think we can over-communicate that, because sometimes I think people get bogged down, and I've got to go here to get this and here to get this. What's the one-stop shop that allows somebody to understand it and do the sense-making within their mind,
Right.
and realize how they're going to use it to plan? So I think you'll be really pleased with the documents. Again, they're live documents, so as we get feedback during the year, we can go in and change that. No one has a hard copy that we have to think, oh, they've got an old version. It'll be online, and they'll be able to go back right to it, and if we see something that's not right, we'll fix it, and keep going. But the training, I think the teachers will really appreciate that. It'll be around the content conversations and the use of the CLP and the CMP, and it's definitely aligned. So we're excited about it.
That's exciting because, you mentioned the limited time. And when we have teachers for back-to-school PD, it is valuable, and it is exciting that the PD is going to give them the need-to-know nows that align with these new updates so that we can fill our capacity for that, that rare moment in time where we have everyone. And it's not optional. It's face-to-face, and it's before the school year even starts. So thank you so much.
Some of the most valuable time we have all year.
Yes,
Right.
thank you so much.
I agree.
Thank you, Ms. McMorrow. Mr. Chapa?
Thank you, President Fowler. Most of my questions are for Dr. Lopez.
Thanks.
So, Dr. Lopez, it's great that you obviously, and it comes across, you like what you do, because that was just so much to take in. And Dr. Reich touched on this earlier about how it is incredible how far the accountability system has strayed, I think, from what its original intent and the roots were. And we've complicated something almost to a point of incomprehension. When you finished, I imagined, I was like, I wish I could take a clip of you making that presentation and make every decision maker in Austin watch it. And then ask, because I feel like if somebody had sat down and said, well, how are we going to design an accountability system? How are we going to evaluate schools across the state to make really, this matters. If we have too many schools that fall in the DNF category for too long, we get wiped out as a board. State comes in and takes over. They did this on the basis of one school in the largest school district in the state recently, Houston ISD, after they improved. Which is pretty incredible. But if you had sat someone down and said, well, explain to me how we're going to do this, and they gave your presentation, I would hope that their response was somewhere along the lines of the guy who does the game show host in Billy Madison. And says, like, that's one of the most insanely idiotic things that I've ever heard, and I award you no points,
And everyone in this audience is dumber for having sat through this presentation.
That's not how, I
Yes, I know.
can't imagine that somebody says, well, that sounds like a good way that we should evaluate schools. It just, I'm a former teacher, and this is, it is incomprehensible to me, because this is not how we would evaluate our students. I mean, it would be educational malpractice to say, I'm going to teach you a certain set of knowledge, and I'm going to judge you based on these metrics. And then in the middle, when the kids are taking the test, or after they've taken the test, you take the test home, and you're like, I've decided I'm going to do something totally different. And I'm evaluating you on the basis of things and with a rigor that was never explained in the beginning. And that's what's being done this year. And I can't help but notice the timing of this, and I pointed this out before, and I hate to be cynical, but I'm a lawyer, but in October, there's going to be a special session potentially on school vouchers, and I just can't help but notice that at the same time the state is creating a system that will reward people with money for pulling their kids out of the public school system, TEA is creating a new evaluation system after the fact, moving the goalposts after the fact, that the entire state is expecting to lower district scores substantially. And to your point, even when some of those districts have shown improvement, it's going to show, for some of them, a substantial drop in what is supposed to be a transparent accountability system. And, I mean, what's the purpose of that, other than to make schools look bad? I mean, if you want to set a goal, and I think that at some level, when CCMR first came out, this is what happened, is we had a lot of low-hanging fruit where we could make big gains for students in college and career readiness, and we did that. And then just as we're coming along and we're improving, they're moving the cut scores for the A for 28 points in 1 year. And that's just not how you would evaluate students it's not how you design an accountability system for anything from 1 year to the next. Because, and I think it kind of speaks for itself, Dr. Buell, and this is not a negative thing, it's comforting to hear you get up and say that in response to this massive change, you're not presenting anything that's really new.
Yeah.
But then it begs the question of, well, what is this supposed to tell us? How is this supposed to inform our instruction and the way that we operate going forward? And if the answer is, well, we just keep refining and doing the new things, and we're going to look bad for a while, but maybe in 5 years or 14 years, if it's still around, maybe, the system will say that we've shown improvement even when we were already doing well and improving all along. So, I also can't help but note that, this system is designed as it is, and it's supposed to purportedly be a good thing for us. If the voucher system passes, private schools, they're not going to be subject to this.
No.
Not at all. So you'll have no way to evaluate how those schools are doing receiving public money.
Yeah.
But we have to jump through all of these hoops in a system that's almost designed to make us look like we're failing. And I have a real problem with that, because if you're not giving us as school districts across the state an opportunity to fairly work towards an objective system of measuring what we're doing and how we're doing it and how well we're doing it, then this is complexity for its own sake. And a question I had was, well, we have you brought up apples to oranges, and then you have the apple to apple. So they're showing us the what-if rating for this year. Do we get to find out? Is there a way to, when the new scores come out, can we say, well, if we had done the same thing last year, what would the scores be in that situation on the 22?
So if you take the 2023 data and apply the 2022 rules to it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That would
we've thought
also
about
be
it.
interesting to know, too. So there's just so many problems with this. I also can't imagine how this is possibly viewed as fair when for the last 2 years, we've been so focused on us recovering from COVID and the massive learning loss. And I remember the discussion just last summer, and the summer going into the legislative cycle was, well, how are we going to recover from this massive loss of learning during COVID? And we've been showing improvement, and your data has backed that up, and we're moving in some areas ahead, recovering quicker than we thought we would.
Yeah.
We were going to do this in the middle of recovering from a once-in-a-generation pandemic. It's insult to injury. I think looking at what teachers and educators across the state have gone through over the last 3 years, and then you throw this on top of it, it's no wonder there's a teacher shortage. It's wants to get in this profession where you are being judged by a system that, as you are improving, is tweaked to make it look like you're failing. It's just fundamentally unfair. And so I mainly just have more comments and more ranting to do. So I'm just going to close up for now. And thank you for everything that you do. I feel like I was just at a TASB board conference this last weekend, and this is at the forefront of the minds of trustees across the state, because we are not the only district that has been improving and is very worried about the drop that we know and essentially been told is coming. And the fact that it's going to be so hard to communicate with some folks that it's already hard enough to communicate how complex it is, and it's not just A, B, C, D, or F.
Right.
But to make it look like, not be in the position of making it look like we're justifying a massive drop in an increase, a poorer performance when we know that we might have been doing better. I think that's such a big lift on the communication front and education side, and I know people across the state are worried we're just not going to be able to do it, and it's going to be another shot that public schools take at the expense of, at the end of the day, frankly, a political agenda.
Yeah.
So with that, I'll shut up.
Thank you, Mr. Chapa. Very good points made. Thank you, Dr. Lopez. Thank you, Dr. Buell. You had me at planning periods for teachers. Love that, giving that back to them. But this is great information. I can't imagine all the work that went into both of your presentations and doing such a great job of explaining it and making it understandable. And we appreciate that, and we know you have a lot of work ahead of you. And we wish you the best of luck with all that. Thank you both so much.
Thank you.
We now come to our open forum for non-agenda items, and I believe we have two speakers this evening. Corporal Kimberly Johnson. Ms. Johnson, this is an open forum segment of the meeting that provides citizens with an opportunity to address the trustees on any subject except personnel. This is not intended to be a discussion or a debate, and trustees will not reply to the speakers. Derogatory comments aimed at an individual will not be tolerated, and you will have 2 minutes to speak. And Ms. Forsberg will let you know when your 2 minutes are up. You may begin.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, Madam President, Dr. Wards, and distinguished board members. A day without security. Excuse me. Who's going to patrol the parking? Who's going to patrol the campus at midnight? Who's going to walk the building at 3 o'clock in the morning? Who will check the charter bus departing for Houston? Who will dispatch 911 when someone has broken into our buildings? Who will assist an administrator with out-of-control special needs students? Let's not forget the disgruntled employees. You know they're going to require an escort. Who will conduct metal checks to keep the guns and keep the vapes off the campus? What about the altercations? That's going to require at least 2 officers. Did I fail to mention the out-of-control parents at registrations? No one will be there to assist to get the students in the classrooms during a lockdown. Who will respond and wait for EMS to arrive? And lastly, who's going to wait with a student at 9 p.m. for his parents to arrive after the game? Your officers are not respected, valued, nor compensated as first responders, yet we are the first to respond. On behalf of the security department, we're asking that you reevaluate the compensation schedule that you just all approved and consider everyone's experience and years of service and explain why an officer with 1 year of service is compensated at $18 an hour. However, an officer that has over 20 years of service in this district is only receiving $20 an hour. We're just asking you to help us to understand, how do we come to that? As we are the only department. Please finish. Yes, ma'am, thank you. We're the only department in this district that's open 24 hours a day? And lastly, would you be as liberal to security to give us a $4 raise increase as you did transportation? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Ms. Leslie Gordian? Welcome, Ms. Gordian.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Madam President, Dr. Warts, members of the board. I want to address a few things. We did hand some handouts to your secretary for y'all to review in consideration of our questions here, okay? Based on compensation plans that are attached with the handouts we provided you, is it accurate to say the superintendent is who recommends compensation plan for all district employees, and you as the board are the ones who reviews and approves compensation plan to be used by the district? Is it also accurate to say that the superintendent or designee recommends to you as the board the amount of employee pay increases as part of the annual budget, and they also determine pay adjustments for individual employees? If those do hold true, based on the AISD website statement, it states, Arlington, and I quote, Arlington ISD offers competitive pay and is one of the highest paying districts in the Metroplex. It pays to work for Arlington ISD. Do you believe this statement is accurate according to the attached image, which you all receive, of the entire Metroplex, which includes Garland, Mesquite, Frisco, Plano, and all other cities in the highest paying districts? Do you believe this is accurate advertising for future prospects to and retainability for future and current employees considering cost of living and inflation? Can you justify Arlington ISD security personnel not receiving the highest pay in the Metroplex consistent with other districts in our Metroplex in the security field with the same description and duties that continue to increase and expand? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gordian. We are now ready for our superintendent's report. Dr. Wertz? Thank you all for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, President Fowler. I'd like to share some information about some exciting news and things that have happened since my last superintendent's report in our meeting in June. And it's been a few weeks since we've been together, so just bear with me. I have a few things to share. First of all, I want to congratulate everyone in our Fine Arts Department for helping Arlington ISD earn Texas Art Education Association District of Distinction honor. We are just one of 68 districts in the state to earn this honor, and more than 1,200 were actually eligible. We received it for providing a well-rounded education that advocates and integrates visual arts curriculum to inspire creativity and build social-emotional learning that connects our students to the community and beyond. And I want to offer a special thanks to Lynn Wynn, our Assistant Director of Fine Arts, of Visual Arts, for all of his hard work. On Tuesday night, we had a special event where nearly 200 of our students graduated at our summer graduation, and that was held at the Dr. Marcelo Cavazos Center for Visual and Performing Arts. And all 6 of our traditional high schools were represented, as well as Venture High School. And congratulations are offered to all of our students who decided to graduate early and those who took a different path but still managed to graduate and are now ready for the next step in each of their lives. Last week was a busy one at Lamar High School as its incoming P-Tech freshmen got their first taste of what life will be like in the new program that's going to focus on cybersecurity and business. You can see some of their faces on the screen. This was the second annual Breakfast with the Boss that we've done, and it gave 125 students a chance to interact with industry leaders from across the area and to find out what they do to make their lives successful. And I also want to extend some thanks to our business leaders for taking time out of their busy schedules to offer advice and answer questions for each of our students. Our district was honored with the EverFi Empowered Seal, and we received this award for being nationally recognized as a district that's committed to the whole child education, and we're honored for our exemplary commitment to comprehensive education strategies on topics like financial literacy, health, and careers. And last but not least, earlier this week, I was able to welcome everyone in the transportation department at their in-service day. The department plays a huge role in making our district go, literally, and we nearly have 300 people in that department, including all of our bus drivers, And they are some of the most important customer service representatives, as they are the first faces that our students see each morning when they are on their way to school. So I want to thank all of them for their hard work, and it was a pleasure to be with them that morning. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Wertz. Do I have any school board reports? Dr. Reich?
Thank you, President Fowler. I just wanted to acknowledge the passing of Phil Whitfield. You may not know his name or know him by name, but he was the, I would call him the chief docent for the Cowboys art in the stadium. He was an incredible individual. We've literally had thousands of our students meet him. And I know Lynn Wynn is probably devastated over this news, but I just wanted to put that out there. And he was a great guy. One of our schools did an amazing art piece at this last art show that the Cowboys sponsored. And I know the Cowboys organization is going to miss him. I know we're going to miss him. I just wanted to put that out there publicly. Rest in peace, Phil.
Thank you, Dr. Reich. And I just want to wish all of the teachers and students a very great start to your school year. And I'm excited about this year. I think it's going to be really great. And I just hope that they have a great start and a great continuation of their school year. And I just want the best for them. Ms. Secretary, do we have anything to report?
Yes, President Fowler, Mr. Wilbanks requested the addition, pardon me. He requested the addition of 2019 bond project updates to be shared with the board and with the community via our district website, such as Gantt charts and project-specific budgets that will show what is over budget or under budget, and that's for the 2019 bond project. Is that correct, Mr. Wilbanks? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McMurrow. It is now 10:23, and we are adjourned.